All right, everyone. Really, the final full day of spring football across the nation in college football, and of course, the final day of the NFL draft. And typically, I would tell you this is the place to be discussion, debate, analysis like no other. But I got to tell you, what did I see of the NFL draft today? Zero. What did I see of spring football today? Zero. So I'm going to be leaning on all of you. We'll talk college football. The link is in the chat. Give me a call. Let's talk anything college football. But of course, our focus is on spring football, which I've looked it over for the last 45, 50 minutes. I've taken notes on the various teams, as many that I could get to. And even though the last two weekends, April 13th and April 20th, were really the weeks packed with most of the major powers, the SEC, etc. We did have about 4, 5, 6 programs of weight that hit the field today, and the NFL draft. One of my favorite events, probably my favorite, no, not probably, my favorite non-playing event in sports. Yes, it's not even close. I can't think of another one. My favorite non-playing event in sports, and you could not have told the Mark Rogers of 10 years ago this, or certainly the Mark Rogers of 10 years old, 10, 12 in middle school, who was actually the only kid in school that would miss school to watch the NFL draft. You could not have told me then, or even again 5 or 10 years ago, Mark, you're not going to see a single pick of the NFL draft. I just did not watch any of it this weekend. I listened to a lot of analysis on the PFF channel, the Pro Football Focus. I don't know what that was on. I watched it on Amazon Prime. Chris Collinsworth was on opening night, and then a bunch of guys that I didn't know but provided good analysis, so they were good. I probably actually got more information listening to them than I did actually watching the ESPN or NFL Network broadcast. But we'll talk spring football, and we're going to talk NFL draft as well, and I'm going to find out in the moment who got drafted by whom, because I have no idea after the first round. All right, let's kick off the day. We got Joey Foster on the line. West Virginia hit the field this afternoon. Joey, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, Mark?
Not too much. I was just telling everyone how much I know about what happened today, which is nothing. I didn't see one pick of the NFL draft. I have no idea who got drafted today. Nor do I know even who got drafted last night. And that's completely unlike me because I love the NFL draft, but I just didn't watch any of it this weekend. And in terms of spring football, yep, I've been gone all day and know nothing about spring football. I've been reading for like 45 minutes trying to catch up. So that's why you're
one
here.
One player off of West Virginia's team that hasn't got drafted that I thought would was Beanie Bishop. All-American, and I think he was transferred from Minnesota, wasn't he? And he was a
Yes.
second team All-American, or maybe it's all Big 12. Second team All Big 12. But anyway, he's not got drafted. So maybe he'll get picked up and as free agent. He's gonna be a good one for somebody if they can grab him.
Oh, he's gonna get picked up as a free agent.
Yeah. So hey, we had an amazing spring game today, and what was really, really good about it was 18,540 fans showed up for the spring game, which is probably more than Pitt averages for home games on the season. So,
Joey, the clock on you was at like 30 seconds to take a shot at Pitt, and you did it. You came in on time.
It's got to happen, But hey, we had an amazing game today. Final score was 34-24. But what was really good about it is we had former players come back and coach the teams. So today, Pat McAfee and Pat White were the coaches for each side, and it was really good. Pat McAfee, they interviewed him during the game, obviously, and he was talking about. He said Pat White's cheating over there, and he said so. If we win, then we beat a cheater, and if they win, well, they cheated to win. So, but they had a lot of fun. A lot of firsts today that I've seen. For instance, fans allowed to take the field after the spring game. The fans were allowed to come out and take the field and say hi to the players, meet everybody. I've never seen that happen in Morgantown. One One thing about today's game was I think everybody knew what to expect from Garrett Green, so nobody was really wanting to see what he could do. We all know what he can do. But we wanted to see what Nico Marchio could do because Nico Marchio is supposed to be, the backup quarterback and supposed to be the most improved player on the team. And he was really good today. Actually, he threw for more yardage than Garrett Green did. So I was really happy with that. But we have some amazing receivers too, and they're returning Preston Fox, who caught a tremendous pass today in the corner of the end zone, had to go up high to grab it and had to pull it away with one hand back in the corner of the end zone. He seems to catch one like that every spring game. Hell, anymore, he's doing it about every game. Catches some really good passes. So, but yeah, we had a really good day today. Like I said, really great to see Pat McAfee and Pat White back there. And really successful day today. Neil Brown's doing a fantastic job up there. They did interview Ren Baker, and he was saying that he felt like the past, but last year was a different Neil Brown. He said because in the past, he said he felt like he was micromanaging too much. And so he decided to let go last year and trust his coaches instead of micromanaging and trust his coaches. And the year paid off for us, going 9-4. So this year, we've got some coaches that have been moved around different places, but the team really looked sharp today, really looked good. The new center for us that's taken over for Zach Frazier, who just went to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the second round last night. He looked good. Both centers did. Both centers looked really good. And so looks like we might have a 10-win team this year to me. And I know a lot of people are saying that we should probably win 9 or 10 games. I think we will. So, but Green today was 8 of 13 for 79 yards. That's what I was looking for. And Marchio was 10 of 19 for 82 yards. So percentage-wise, looks like Green was better. But Marchio has some better passes, I think. We have a running back, freshman, Clay Ash. He was the top ball carrier. He just gained 26 yards on 6 carries. But he's a real little guy. So if he's standing there with you, his face is right at your chest. I'm only 5'8", and I think his face would be at my chest. He's kind of small, but really fast, really shifty. Yeah, kind of really fast, really shifty. So he should be a pretty good player for West Virginia. But we're loaded in the backfield, so I don't see him getting in the game too much this year. But yeah, man, we had a great day.
So if you think West Virginia can shoot for, let's say, a 9 or 10 win season, so let's go 9-3. Let's just say 9-3. And if they lose the Penn State game, that means they only lost 2 games in the Big 12. They could sneak into the championship game.
Yeah. They could always lose to Pitt. Probably not likely, but they could lose to Pitt. So that could be 2 losses.
I'm just basically saying they lose 1 game outside the conference.
Right. If they lose 1 game outside the conference and 2 in the conference, right?
They could sneak into the conference championship game.
We could, but West Virginia's got a really tough conference schedule this year, because we have to play all the teams that are improved and doing really well right now. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kansas, all those teams we've got to play. We got to go out and play Arizona in the desert. So, we've got a really tough schedule, and plus playing Penn State and Pitt. So, that's why we're saying 9 or 10, because it's going to be so hard to just, stay focused through all those games that are going to be really tough to play. But I do see, I know a lot of people are saying we're going to beat Penn State, and I'm one of them that's saying that I think we'll beat Penn State this year. It would be great if we could beat Penn State and then win our cupcake game and then beat Pitt and go into the Big 12 schedule 3-0 would help a lot, because it's a gauntlet in the Big 12, as you know. All the teams are really close and together, and there's not a lot of difference. There's a lot of parity in the Big 12, right? So I'm really looking forward to what West Virginia can do this year in the Big 12. But that out of conference schedule is really tough, and we need to win those to get a good run as the Big 12, I think.
Well, I think it's the most intriguing conference in the country. I think it's the most balanced, and I think that to me, it's the most interesting. Well, I'll pull back on that. I don't necessarily think it. To me, this is personal
Right.
opinion. Of course, it's personal opinion. I do think it's the most balanced. I stopped short of most interesting because I was thinking about, of course, the new teams coming into the Big Ten and the new teams coming into the SEC at the top of the conference. But hey.
Right, but there's no conference, like you said. There's no conference that's as close together as the Big 12 from top to bottom. There's none. But if you're looking at the bottom of this conference this year, you would probably have to think Cincinnati, Baylor, and maybe I say Houston, but hey, Houston's got a lot of talent. New coach coming in. Only reason I'd put Houston at the bottom is because of a new coach. Start taking over.
Do you remember who West Virginia misses in the Big 12?
No, not offhand. I do not. I do not
I'll
think
pull it up here.
I didn't pull it up, and because I'm trying to think who we missed in the Big 12. We played. I think we're playing Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Wow, tough question all of a sudden.
Oh,
there we go. Pulling it up. Good deal.
So once we get into the Big 12, there's Kansas, Oklahoma State, as you mentioned, Iowa State, Kansas State. That's a pretty tough run there.
That is.
Arizona on the road, Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF, Texas Tech. So I see Houston missing.
Right.
BYU.
But that middle stretch right there between Oklahoma State and Arizona, that 4-game stretch is a tough stretch.
Okay, so there's 16 teams in the Big 12, so that's 15 other teams. You're playing 9 games, so you're missing 6 teams in the conference. Well, there's no Arizona State there. There's no Houston. There's no BYU.
No Utah.
TCU.
Right.
Somebody else we're missing. But I would agree that that you're hitting most of the better teams outside of Utah.
Yes, outside of Utah, probably dodging a bullet, not playing Utah. And like I say, if we can get through, well, there's a 5-game stretch there, but they got a bye week between the first and second one. But between Kansas and Arizona, that's really the best teams in the Big 12 coming in this year, other than Utah and West Virginia. And of course, West Virginia playing. But the teams that everybody's talking about, Kansas State, Arizona, Kansas, all those teams, we're playing them. So we're dodging a bullet with Utah. But, having to play everybody else is going to be a tough schedule.
Colorado would be the other team. You don't
Colorado,
play.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you make it through that trip to Arizona with a bye week, you've got 3 of the weaker teams in the conference in a row. So if you make it through that tough stretch, maybe West Virginia is going to make some noise.
Yeah, and Texas Tech, they're just recruiting. The recruiting down there is phenomenal at Texas Tech. Joey McGuire is really recruiting well. The last 2 years, he's had a top 20 class or top 25 class at Texas Tech. So he's doing really well down there at Texas Tech. Last year didn't pan out for him. I thought Texas Tech would be a lot better last year than they were. And of course, they made a bowl game, but they just wasn't. They weren't up there with a 9 or 10 win season like I expected them to have. Can they do it this year? We'll see, or it could be an easy game if it's like last year, if they haven't improved any. But with the talent they've got, I don't see that happening. I think they're going to improve.
We want to make sure that everybody's aware that Joey has a number of shows lined up on the West Virginia channels starting on Monday nights each week for you. So there's a live show every night except Tuesday, correct?
Correct. We're doing a live show every night Tuesdays. Even doing a live tonight at 9:00, the post-spring game, and I'll have Jordan Cruz on there with me. But we have Monday nights. We go live at 7:00. Wednesday night's the Mountaineer show with the Mountaineer locker room with Frank Fear and Coach Greg Chris. Thursday nights, the Big 12 show on the West Virginia channel, and Friday nights is Mountaineer Live. Well, last night I had to cancel, and I apologize for everybody for that. Just couldn't be helped. But we are doing a show tonight, 9 o'clock, here in about 35 minutes. So be sure and tune in over there and at least give us a thumbs up and a hello, if you would.
Okay, Joey. One more
All right,
minute out
Mark.
of you. I got a question for you. Got
Okay.
one more question for you because your comment about Texas Tech and playing them the final game of the season reminds me of something that I find very strange about the Big 12 this year. We know what rivalry weekend's all about. Not that there aren't rivalries scheduled throughout the season in different conferences, but most
Right.
of them are concentrated on the final weekend. And the Big 12 has typically done that as well. And this came to mind the other day. I was recording with Melissa Treewasser from her TCU podcast and Dave Campbell's Texas football. And I saw that TCU is playing Cincinnati on the final weekend. It's like if you look at the Big 12 schedule, the final weekend looks like they just threw names up in the air and let them land and put them together. There's no Kansas State. There's no just the schools that you would think would be playing, the Texas schools would be playing. They're all over the place. It just seems as though that was not a priority. It couldn't have been a priority.
The only rivalry game I can think of, the last game of the season this year, is Kansas State and Iowa State, Farmageddon, right? I think they're playing the last game of the season.
Are.
And then they're playing the first game of the season next year overseas. That game's going overseas. So
I didn't know that.
They're going to Ireland. Is it Ireland? I believe it's Ireland next year to play that game. And that'll be first game of the year, Iowa State and Kansas State, Farmageddon. This year, it's the last game of the year. And I think that's the only rivalry game in the Big 12 that week. I don't know of any others. But there's not very many rivalries left in Big 12.
True. But here's the lineup. Black Friday, Oklahoma State at Colorado. So that's not one. Utah at UCF. Like you can't get any crazier than that game. Utah traveling all the way to Orlando on the final weekend of the season. Now, here's one that they're preserving, probably because these two schools might have kicked up a bit of dust on this one to say, hey, we got to keep this one. Arizona State. They are playing as they always do. But Kansas, Baylor, Houston, BYU, you would think that they might put BYU and Utah together the final weekend or carry over the Colorado-Utah game because the Pac-12 always put those two together the final weekend. They've got, like I mentioned, TCU and Cincinnati, Kansas State, Iowa State. So there's your other rivalry game. And then Texas Tech and West Virginia, who, of course, shared a conference for 10 years or more, 12 years. But it's really not a rivalry.
No, Texas Tech and West Virginia are not a rivalry. I would say West Virginia and Baylor was closer to a rivalry than West Virginia and Texas Tech. Because if you remember back when we first came to the conference in 2012, Baylor and West Virginia went down to the wire on a 70-63 game. Remember, West Virginia pulled it out in 2012, 70-63. Both teams were top 5 teams that year at that time. So, expected to be a high-scoring game, and it was. And in 2013, it was the same way, a high-scoring game. I don't remember what the final score was, but like 60-45 or something. The following year, high-scoring, and it was just it's just been one of them battles through the years that's now here late, Baylor's down. West Virginia's been down for a few years, and now Baylor's down. So I guess that game's not really that big anymore, but it was to Mountaineer fans and the Baylor fans for a while. So, but it was probably the closest thing that West Virginia had to a rivalry in the Big 12, in my opinion. Now, I know a lot of people would probably disagree with me, and Timothy Green might be one out there in the chat that would say, no, I think this team would be a better rival. I know a lot of people are saying, well, we got Cincinnati now, so at least that's close to a rivalry. Well, Cincinnati's got to take a couple of steps up. To me, for Mountaineers, we're going to look at it as a rivalry. Cincinnati is 3-19 against West Virginia all time. So it's not like they ever had a big win over West Virginia. Really, they beat us 3 times out of 22 times. So, Yeah, I don't know. UCF, another one of them things that last year when we went down to UCF and played them, I kept thinking this is going to be a really good game. I can't wait to see it. This might be a future rivalry game for West Virginia, and West Virginia just drug them up and down the field, and they didn't even have a chance in that game. So I don't know who's going to be the rivalry for West Virginia, Cincinnati or UCF, whichever one can pick it up the fastest and get playing good football again. I know Cincinnati's a good team, has been in the past, and I know UCF's probably the best up and coming team out there. So the talent that UCF has and the coach, there's no way that they're going to stay down and stuff. So I'm looking for UCF to make a big run this year, but I'm not expecting to finish in the top 10 of the Big 12 again myself.
Yeah, I would like to see a rivalry for West Virginia in that conference, and Cincinnati's obviously geographically the one that makes sense. And they did share a conference together in the Big East for, trying to think how long that would have been when the Big East formed in the early 2000s or the early 1990s up until late 2000. So close to 20 years.
Right.
Just about 20 years. Yeah.
And I guess most people in West Virginia are looking hard at the ACC to see what happens there, because our thinking is if Clemson and Florida State get out of there, maybe some other teams want out too, and we can grab a Pitt and Virginia Tech or something, and pull them in or something, and that would be rivalries, right? That'd be two rivalries. Yeah. We play the backyard brawl against Pitt, and we play for the Black Diamond Trophy against Virginia Tech. Two really huge rivalry games, two biggest rivalry games for West Virginia. So if the ACC does fall apart eventually, that could pick up. We could pick up a good rivalry game in the Big 12. But that's a big if, right? So anyway, all right, Mark. Well, I'm gonna go up and get ready for my show. And thank you, buddy. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you later.
Joey Foster going live here in just about a half hour on the West Virginia channel, so please join him there. We're going to have fun talking college football. So we're just going to dive into college football. We're going to check the transfer portal. Don't know that much happened today, but we're still going to check it. And we're going to go through the NFL draft, and we're going to go through the various spring games as best we can. I will certainly welcome any information that you have there in the chat by way of comments or questions, and certainly we'll take your call. We have left the link in the chat. I will leave it there again. So please give us a call. I have sent out a link to a number of media contributors to see if they wanted to jump in concerning their particular teams that played today. However, don't expect too much of a response because I just sprung it on them. I'm going live right now. There's a link. You can jump on if you'd like. All right, let's get to spring football. Similar to the coverage we have with West Virginia and Joey Foster right here at the Voice of College Football, West Virginia. Earlier today, after the Nebraska spring game, Justin Adams live over on the Huskers channel. So check that out with Justin. So what we picked up from listening to Matt Rule's press conference, and if you missed me off the top, I am truly telling you that this would be the one time, this is the day that I am truly just the maven, the center, the core of the college football universe in regards to knowledge, because I saw nothing of the NFL draft. I don't even know who got drafted. I'm not just saying I didn't watch the TV show. I have no idea who got drafted all day, and no idea because I don't recollect who even got drafted Friday night. I have never missed an NFL draft since I've been 10 years old. I missed one this weekend. So I missed the NFL draft. So I'm going to give you, for me, it's going to be instant, in the moment reaction. I'm going to go through all the picks. I'll either just read them off, or if I've got something to say about that particular player, we're going to run through the NFL draft. And certainly, of course, I want your comments and questions about what happened in Detroit this weekend. And probably the most talked about player, at least on this channel over the weekend, Who do you think that was? Who does the chat think was the most talked about player here over the weekend? I am curious to see if you've been in tune with or paid attention and I think I can say this and not even have looked in the chat consistently, but I think it's pretty obvious. Ralph says Michael Penix. I think he's probably the most talked about across the nation, but on our channel, Cooper DeJean. Good call by Jackson. Good call by Jackson. But it's not Cooper DeJean. We don't have enough Iowa fans here. JJ McCarthy. That's all I've seen. Every time I look in the chat, it's been JJ McCarthy for the past week. It's all JJ McCarthy. All right, at the Nebraska spring game. And again, I would advise you to check out Justin Adams' post game over on our Huskers channel. White defeated the Red 25-21. Now, I don't know the details, but there must have been devastating tornadoes in Nebraska on Friday because that was addressed at the news conference. Not details given, but just noting how severe the situation was on Friday in Nebraska. And I don't know how many states that affected, but again, there were a lot of Nebraska fans and families of coaches and so forth that were affected by the tornadoes in Nebraska. 60,000 at the stadium. So Nebraska's sellout streak is broken. Two big injuries, Bly Hill and Demetrius Bell, DB and wide receiver. And really, other than that, Dylan Raiola hit on 16 of 21 in the first half. He played most of the way and seemed to have performed rather well. I did not see any of the game again, but by all accounts, what I checked out online are the reports that, and these might have been a bit biased coming from the Nebraska media, but that Dylan Raiola looked the part. Danny Kalin is also a player that was, I'll probably screw up the timeline, but there was some thought there from Daniel Kalin as to whether he would go to Nebraska because of the Dylan Raiola commitment and because of Dylan Raiola's situation when he was still looking Ohio State, and then he decommitted from Ohio State, and Daniel Kalin committed to Nebraska when it appeared as though Dylan Raiola was going elsewhere. Did Raiola, in fact, commit to Georgia? I can't confirm that off the top of my head. My mind's playing some tricks with me. We know he committed to Ohio State. I thought he committed to Georgia, decommitted, signed with Nebraska. Daniel Kalin is a very talented freshman quarterback as well, but he is stuck behind Dylan Raiola, and for the time being, it looks like he's going to stick it out, although the transfer portal is open through the end of the month. Then you've got Heinrich Harburg, who was the starting quarterback for much of last season, along with Chubba Purdy. And he's going to be the number 3. Well, he is going to be a backup quarterback. I don't know if he's going to be number 3 because Matt Rule may want veteran experience backing up Raiola. But Raiola is the one, even though it's not official. He's the one. Probably Heinrich Harburg because of his experience. He's a runner. There's been talk that he could get reps at tight end, although they don't need that at Nebraska. They got Thomas Fidone and a strong tight end core at Nebraska. And then the third string quarterback, again, as I mentioned, the true freshman, Daniel Kalin, who's really highly thought of. So that's the story from Lincoln. Again, check out our post game. Maryland, they've got a quarterback battle. White defeated the Red. When you're deciding the colors for a Maryland spring game, I would just think that you would have an issue. You've got red, you got black, you got yellow, you've got white. I would think it would be the checkerboard versus the block M, but the checkerboard is the look, of course, with the Terps, and the white team defeated the whoever team, the red team, 34-3. Three-way quarterback battle at Maryland. You've got MJ Morris, who I think is going to win the starting job. He played well at NC State, did MJ Morris. He played better than Brennan Armstrong, who I had a ton of respect for, and the way he lit it up in 2021 and was never the same for some reason. But MJ Morris really put together some nice games at NC State for a team that went 9-4 last year, although at one point in the season, he decided to redshirt. Okay, so we first saw MJ Morris in 2022, and he threw 7 touchdowns and 1 pick in relief of, at that point, it would have been, that was before Brendan Armstrong got there. Devin Leary was the starting quarterback at that point. MJ Morris, 2022 Virginia Tech game, 20 of 29 for 265 and 3 touchdowns. Wake Forest game, 18 of 28, 3 touchdowns. Boston College game, 12 for 24, 135, 1 touchdown. Had a rough go against Boston College. Otherwise, 3 really strong games for MJ Morris in 2022. And he can run. He ran for 65 yards today. He led 2 of the Terps' 3 touchdown drives. 3 quarterbacks played equal snaps for Maryland today, and MJ Morris accounted for 2 of the 3 touchdown drives as a quarterback. Last year, he played 4 games, and then this is what he became famous for last year. Talking about MJ Morris, NC State, and now Maryland quarterback, is that after 4 games, he said, calling it quits, gonna redshirt, I'm done. Marshall was a good game, threw 4 touchdowns, did throw 3 picks, but 4 touchdowns, 265 in the air. 24-40 at Duke for a $193 and a pick. They won the game against Clemson. He went 11 of 20 for 138. Threw 2 touchdowns against Clemson. Threw a touchdown against Miami. They won that game as well. 11 of 21. He is 5-2 as a starting quarterback. So MJ Morris, just mark him down as the favorite for the Maryland job right now. Although I would have told you a couple months ago that the favorite was Billy Edwards. He had kind of a rough day today. Had a couple bad overthrows on guys that were wide open for touchdowns. And Billy Edwards, he's a runner too. So MJ Morris, very elusive, very strong runner. Billy Edwards, good runner. Billy Edwards has logged some valuable playing time at Maryland. And I most remember Billy Edwards from 2 seasons ago at the Big House, Maryland staying within 1 score of the eventual Big Ten champion. And Talia Tagovailoa got injured. Billy Edwards came in, led a touchdown drive in the final couple of minutes to get within 1 score of Michigan and a failed onside kick. So Maryland made it a bit dicey in the Big House, and Billy Edwards led a clutch drive against a good Michigan defense. All right, then you got Cameron Edge. I know nothing about him. I know the other 2 quarterbacks because they played Big Ten college football, but Cameron Edge, but apparently he's right in the mix for the starting job at Maryland. 11 of 25 for a $151 and 2 excellent throws to Octavian Smith. Maryland's two biggest threats on the outside, Ty Felton and Caden Prather, did not play today. But Robert Smith at wide receiver for Maryland, impressive today. Sophomore tight end Dylan Wade caught a couple passes for 41 yards and replacing Corey Dyches. If you're familiar, Corey Dyches, one of the best tight ends in the Big Ten, has left for Cal. Left Maryland for Cal. Don't know how I feel about that, considering that Cal does not appear to be the type program that is going to wow anyone with NIL money. So Corey Dyches leaves Maryland and goes to Cal. Okay. Well, it's a heck of a school, that's for sure. All right. Then we've got the Oregon spring game. The green over the white, or is it the yellow or the neon? The green won 28-23. So that was Dylan Gabriel's team against Dante Moore's team. So the two transfer quarterbacks and Dylan Gabriel. If you're a stats nerd, look up Dylan Gabriel and his rankings all time in college football. If he puts together just a standard season, he is going to be one of the most prolific. He already is one of the most prolific quarterbacks in the history of college football. Gabriel's team won 28-23. Now, I did not realize that Dylan Gabriel hails from the same Oahu as Marcus Mariota. And they both wear number 8, and that was approved by Mariota, of course, the Heisman Trophy winner from 2014. He approved giving up his retired jersey, and Dylan Gabriel will be wearing number 8. Threw a 49-yard pass to Evan Stewart. Of course, he's the huge transfer incoming from Texas A&M, was the number 1 rated receiver in the country coming out of high school, had 2 decent seasons at Texas A&M, especially considering their issues with play calling and quarterback play. This past season, guys were just hurt. Gabriel, 14 of 21 for $163 and 2 touchdowns. Oregon's loaded on offense. They are loaded. Oregon may post the best offense in college football. It's possible. Jordan James in the backfield, Tez Johnson, wide receiver. Even though Bo Nix is gone to the Denver Broncos with the 12th pick in the first round of the NFL draft, and Bucky Irving, their top back, he's gone. What is going on here? We've got picks per school. As of 2 days ago, according to D-Rock Irish. And we'll get to the NFL draft. Notre Dame 525, USC 524, Ohio State 485. So this is going into the draft. Oklahoma 414. Penn State 381, LSU 375. Florida 372. I guess that's Georgia 371. No Alabama. No Michigan. No Texas. Florida? Florida would be the one that would surprise me the most. Not that they've not been awesome for the last, in terms of developing talent and churning out talent in the last 40 years. But before that, aside from the Steve Spurrier era, Florida football has not been awfully strong. It's not a old style back to the 1920s blue blood. Although NFL draft, we're going 1936. So there's the tally right there. Notre Dame still leads USC by 1. Is that correct? I thought they had a bigger lead than that. So I'm guessing the NFL draft concluded sometime a couple hours ago. So I don't know if anyone's posted any data on picks by team or by conference. Oh, Michigan 13. So Michigan did not set the record. I thought Michigan was going to just squash this record. I thought Michigan was just going to completely annihilate this record. I thought that that was assumed, and I'm not making fun of Michigan. Lord knows I would never do that. But I thought as well that Michigan was going to. I'm curious to see who did not get drafted from Michigan for them not to break the record, because I thought they had. I saw a list at one time of 22 eligible Michigan players, and it wasn't a joke of a list like the last five guys had no chance of being drafted. It was a legitimate list, 1 through 22. So Michigan did lead this year, but did not set a record, which is still held by, it was Ohio State and LSU, and then I believe Georgia broke it. Michigan 13, Texas 11, Alabama 10, Florida State 10, Washington 10, Oregon 8, Georgia and Penn State with 8. Okay. There it is. So, as expected, a great showing by Michigan in the NFL draft. Now, if we look up, by conference, I think we've got a by conference list. And so, how are they counting this? Okay, they're counting it based on conferences from last year. Okay, that's the way it should be counted. Not giving all sorts of credit to the Big Ten and the SEC for schools that they had nothing to do with. So here we've got, this really shows how good the Pac 12 has been the last few years, because the Pac 12 has been nowhere close to the top in a long time. SEC with 59, Pac 12 with 43. So the SEC, once again, for the millionth time in a row, or whatever the number is, 59, 43. That's a big lead, especially since the next three are basically bunched up. So there's little separation between three of the other four. And you see the Pac 12 one better than the Big Ten, and the ACC only behind by one. They're in the fourth position, Big 12 with 31. And then independent, you've got to think that that's almost all Notre Dame, although UConn had a pick early. Was it UConn? Anyway, Sun Belt, American Conference USA. It's always the American and typically the Mountain West with the likes of Fresno State, San Diego State, those schools, but not this year. And the MAC with only two, however, one in the first round. I always am interested to see this chart, even though it is always the same. It's usually something in the range where the SEC, I've seen years where they've pushed 70, been in the mid to high 60s, and then the Big Ten is about 15 behind, 12 to 15 behind, and then in comes the ACC typically, and then the Pac 12 and the Big 12 are vying for fourth and fifth. Okay. So there we go. Now, if we go to the actual draft tracker, let's pick it up with the third round. Jets, Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. Arizona, Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State. Now, Trey Benson injured a knee at Oregon and was not much of a factor at Oregon. Played well when he did play, but then he goes to Florida State. In this past season, he was arguably the best back in college football. So Benson goes to the Cardinals. Washington takes Brandon Coleman out of TCU, a guard. Patriots take Caden Wallace, offensive tackle from Penn State, which I understand that Penn State set some kind of record for number of times 2 or more offensive linemen drafted. All right, there Michigan shows up with Junior Colson. Always enjoyed watching him play. Giants, Andrew Phillips, cornerback out of Kentucky. I'm not familiar with him. Cardinals, Isaiah Adams, guard out of Illinois. Panthers, Trevin Wallace, linebacker, Kentucky. So look at the Wildcats. And it's probably underregarded by a lot of people that watch college football and are interested in the NFL draft, how successful Kentucky has been over the last 5 years in producing NFL defensive players. Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State at guard to Dallas. Braylon Trice is the outside linebacker from Washington, who is one of the big reasons why Washington went to the national championship game last year. He was their best player on defense. Off the edge, he was their best player in the front seven. Jabbar Muhammad, probably their best player overall. Karan Amagage out of Yale, offensive tackle, goes to the Bears. All right. Let's take another call. We got David showing up for us here.
Yes. Hello to the great Mark Rogers. How you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. Good to see you, David.
A pleasure. I am going to put down my saber tonight. Shout out to all my TTUN brethren out there. And not speak ill of the team up north today. I actually am going to give as unbiased opinion about this draft as I possibly can. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Ohio State spring game, of course.
You can, though, David, still brag about the Buckeyes' best class having one more than Michigan's best class.
Of course,
They did not supersede that number, and I am genuinely surprised. I'm not stunned or anything. I'm not an NFL mock draft expert guy, but I had been hearing all sorts of crazy numbers about how high this number was going to be.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. A bunch of 30-year-olds going in the 5th and 6th round. They've got to be really proud of this, this class that they had this year, I'm sure. The Buckeyes produce NFL players and, of course, their first-round draft picks. But that goes without saying. They've had the most in the history of college football. But I digress. Just wanted to add that.
You also went against what you said a couple seconds ago. But I guess I opened the door for you.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay.
I had to walk through it, Mark. I will say this about the draft, though. A couple things about the quarterbacks in just the overall first round. First of all, as surprising as Penix was to Atlanta, how surprised were you to see Bo Nix go to Denver?
Surprised, yes. I like Bo Nix as a competitor. I like him as a playmaker. I can't say that I can really speak to anything else about him from an intangible standpoint. He's a gamer type. He loves the game. He seems to be a hard worker and all those things. But the 12th pick in the draft, Bo Nix, wow.
Yeah. I don't see it. To me, what he seems like is very much a system type quarterback.
Yep.
I mean, like a lot of the typical Oregon quarterbacks that have put up numbers over the years, whether it be, when Helfrich was the coach, or Chip Kelly was the coach, or, any number of quarterbacks that they've had over the years that have put up big numbers out there. And maybe also his experience at Auburn and, kind of the inconsistent to poor play that we saw all those years at Auburn is another thing that concerned me about his future as an NFL quarterback as well.
So I heard a stat the other day, and I'm not going to be able to recite the number, but it underlined how little Bo Nix threw the ball downfield in college. That
Right.
he basically, especially of course, playing 2 years in this offense at Oregon, he obviously thrived, and it's a credit to him. It was a well-oiled machine, but once he got some type of stability around him and got an offense that he could work with, so he played worse defenses, but he also got a
Right.
lot of stability around him. And I know Kenny Dillingham moved on after one season to go to Arizona State, but he at least got to kind of settle in, because there was a time in his career when he had a different offensive coordinator for like 3 consecutive years. So uh, I I'm not going to say I'm rooting for him. You know, I'm not rooting against him. He seems like a good guy and all those good things. I wish the best
Mhm.
there. I will say it that way. I want people to succeed, but I I just, when I saw that go up, I thought, oh, did I not? I am not keeping track of the mock drafts, as I mentioned, but did I miss it this much where I didn't hear the talk of Bo Nix? And then my second thought was, is this why the Denver Broncos have been so bad for so long?
Well, and you know what? First of all, I don't think Sean Payton ever liked Russell Wilson. You could clearly see last year that he did not want Russell Wilson as his quarterback. And the shame of it was is Wilson played better as the year went along that last year. He actually statistically had a pretty good season in Denver last year, but you could just see bottom line that marriage was never going to work. Now, the bottom line is, I just don't see Bo Nix as a future NFL quarterback, because in watching him in Oregon, you're absolutely right. What you see is a lot of those quick flip out throws to, getting the ball out to players in space so that they can make a play. I don't see a whole lot of a guy that drops back in the pocket, reads coverage, and pushes the ball down the field accurately. He can make some plays outside the structure of the offense, and that's all good and well. But in the NFL, we all know you have to be able to make plays inside the pocket and outside the pocket as well, which concerns me about more than a few of the quarterbacks that are part of this um, draft class, but him especially, I would say, Mark.
Yeah,
But
again, I wish him the best, but I I just think this is another example of teams are looking for that guy, and there's only a few of them, and they stretch their limits to try to make somebody the guy.
yeah, I think that there's a belief that they can transition these college quarterbacks a lot easier into the NFL nowadays than they used to be able to. And that these coordinators can come up with schemes that can make them work easier than they could at one time. Um, I will say this about the Penix situation that shocked everybody in the first round. First of all, you remember our discussions way back in the summer. Nobody was on the Washington Michael Penix train bigger than I was, Mark. I picked them to win the conference and make the playoff before the season started. That being said, a couple of things about his season. First thing, what was that point during the season where he hit that kind of a lull? Where he was not playing particularly well.
Yep.
Was that like mid-season, or was that more towards the end of the season? It
It
escapes
was
me now.
mid to late.
Okay. Yeah, because he was not playing. He got hot early, and then there was a portion of the season where I know he was not playing his best football. I don't have his game log in front of me, and maybe you can tell me better than I can. But I thought, hit about it like a 3-game stretch, maybe
Yep,
4-game stretch.
he did. And I'll let you know here in a second. I know the Arizona State game for sure was not a good one. And so, yeah. So once we got to mid to late October after the Oregon game, the big, huge win. They get the missed field goal. They win the huge game. He throws for 302 and 4 touchdowns in that game. Then Arizona State, 64%, 275, no TDs, 2 picks.
Right.
Stanford, now there's nothing wrong with this game, but Stanford was one of the worst teams in the country. He hit on 56%, 369, 4 touchdowns and a pick, but they really struggled in that game. They only had a 2-point lead late in the fourth quarter. USC, I'm not finding these games. They're a little bit later. Here we go. The USC game, he played well just to get to the games you're talking about in which he struggled. The Utah game, not a great completion percentage, but he was clean, no picks. So Oregon State, that was the game. They won like 24-22. He 13 of 28, 162, did throw a couple touchdowns. And then the Washington State game, that was the one where they went for it on their own 25-yard line on 4th and inches with like 50 seconds on the clock, where they could have given up a game-winning field goal, but they made it. And then they got a long run and won the game by a field goal against a pretty bad Washington State team. 18 of 33 with a pick in that game. So I got to admit, it wasn't as bad of a slide as I remember. But yeah, he came right out of the gate. Everything was mid 70%, high 70% the first 5 games, throwing for 450, 409, 473, 304, 363. And then he's more in the low 200s, had a 162 game there near the end of the season.
Yeah, maybe that's why we think of it that way, Mark, because of what you just said, of the hot start that he got. Although I think that hot start was aided by playing that strength of schedule early was not the strongest from what I remember.
No.
Picked on that poor Michigan State secondary that people have been picking on for like 4 or 5 years now, by the way. I would say this, Mark, and I don't know if you heard this about him, that there was a rumor out there before he was taken this high that if he would have lost to Texas, let's say Texas hits that pass, yours had to throw into the end zone late to win that semifinal game, that he would have been drafted that much higher. That really his title game performance, there was a thinking out there that was going to cause him to slide in the draft, maybe have cost him a round or two. I don't know if you were hearing the same thing.
Well, no, I wasn't hearing anything because I don't follow the draft, but it makes sense. I don't think he played as horribly as some people do.
Yeah.
That I've talked to on here in the championship game, but he didn't play well. There's no doubt. It would have been a much more interesting game had he hit the throws that he typically hit and hit the week before.
Right. He wasn't aided by his offensive line, and they did a pretty and there were some missed throws there too by him as well. I would say this. The one thing that always worries about me, and I think I mentioned this to you before about him, is that long delivery he has. That's part of his game that I think could be problematic in the NFL and could, I don't know, maybe cause him some issues. But
yeah, it looks pretty, but I don't know that it's going to be effective when the split seconds are much more important. The windows close and the speed rushers around the edge get there quicker and are much more adept at causing havoc and knocking the ball out of a quarterback's hands.
Well, I would say this, Mark. I mean, I was impressed with his accuracy. I think he can make tight window throws. I think he can, and he's pretty much a pure pocket kind of guy as far as a passer goes. So, and I mean, and I know in college you get a lot of throws where the receivers are getting a lot of separation, but I've seen him, especially in the Texas game, hit some tight windows, some real tight window throws. I would say this about the other quarterbacks. Mark, were you thinking that McCarthy was going to go even higher than that? Because I heard early on that McCarthy could have gone 3rd or 4th, maybe even as high as 2.
Well, yeah, that's what was being said just prior to the draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've already stated my views on McCarthy, so I'm not going to go there. But I will say this: of all the teams drafting high, I would say one of the better rosters of teams drafting high is the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm. Well, why are they drafting so high?
Well, yeah, I believe there was a trade there, or they may have made a move, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't, as you well know, I don't keep up with the NFL like I used to. I just watch the games on Sunday afternoon, but I don't dissect it. But unless I'm missing something from what's happened in the last couple of years, the Vikings are almost always good. They just went to an NFC Championship game a couple of years ago, so I thought, yeah, this is a great landing spot for him.
Well, no, they didn't go to the championship game a couple years ago. They lost. They had a good
Oh,
record, and then they lost early to the Giants in the wild card round.
Okay, I was thinking of, yeah, they lost just prior to the San Francisco Philadelphia championship game. One of those two knocked them out, right?
They lost in the wild card game to the Giants after they had like a 13-win season, I believe, in 2022. I remember I made some
Okay.
money on that game, and because the Cousins era, I believe, has only produced pretty much 2 playoff appearances. He had that one upset of Drew Brees in 2019 where they lost to the
Sure.
49ers in the divisional round. But
Okay.
I
Maybe
think,
that's what I'm thinking of.
yeah, those have kind of been the highlights of the Cousins era in Minnesota. By the way, I think that's what what Atlanta is thinking there is that Cousins is just going to be a bridge quarterback because I think Atlanta's thinking is that Penix could probably take that job in another couple of years because let's be honest, I don't think Cousins is long for that job, Mark. I don't think Cousins is going to be there. They didn't pick him up with the expectations of him being the starting quarterback for 5 or 6 years or something.
Well, I know the Falcons GM made some kind of comment about what's wrong with having a quarterback sit for 4 or 5 years uh, and then be the man or something like that.
Well, but I mean, we've seen this before, though. I mean, Mahomes had to sit for a year behind Alex Smith. Obviously, Jordan Love, who's playing pretty good football right now, had to sit for a couple of years behind Rodgers before he took the job, and that seems to be off to a very good start for him so far.
Yeah, he's a good player.
The one thing that I was thinking, and I was big on May coming into this draft, Mark, is I thought he would slip to Minnesota, which I thought would totally benefit him. I was a little surprised he went as high as he did to New England. Is bottom line what I'm saying. I don't know if you have
Well,
any
I've
thoughts
made
on
the
that.
comment on here a few times that I understand that Drake May is an exceptional player, obviously, but when I've watched him play, I've not been overly impressed. But I don't watch him play every week.
Hmm.
I'm not breaking film down, so I've seen him play here and there, and it always seems like North Carolina disappoints every time I watch him play, and he does as well.
Yeah, I really thought that he would have a much better statistical season this year. He disappointed me from like if we would have had the conversation about what I would have thought he would have just had a bigger season statistically this year than he did because there was a lot of hype on him coming into the season beforehand to begin with. I believe he did lose some players though off his 22 roster, some skill, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Oh yeah, yeah. They lost the two running backs, and yeah, he lost most of his weapons, although they replaced them pretty well.
Yeah, the other thing with his situation is I really wonder how good of a landing spot New England is nowadays, though, too, Mark, especially with where that roster's at, and not there not being much around him to kind of help him out early. Although that's obviously the negative of being drafted so high, but just
All
thinking
right,
that
David.
organization is not what it used to be. Oh, I did
Yeah.
want to say one thing about the spring game before I let you go, though, Mark, if I
Oh,
can.
you've got plenty of time. I just, again, if we're
Oh.
talking front office moves in the NFL, I just have no idea.
No, I was just
I,
I was
I,
just kind of making
I can
the
barely
point.
name a head coach in the NFL these days.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, they change quite frequently, Mark, so I don't necessarily blame you for that. So,
Well,
um,
certainly don't blame me because I don't keep up with it. But yeah, there would certainly been a time when I would have been embarrassed about admitting that I didn't know one coach in the NFL because that never
although
happened.
one last thing on the quarterbacks in the drafts, Mark. The more and more I've watched some of the highlights or some of the tapes of Jaden Daniels and kind of rewatching some of their games that LSU had this year, I'm becoming more and more of a believer.
Well, I think that my first impressions of Jaden Daniels going all the way back to Arizona State was that he seemed to play well in important situations. He played well in the clutch. His athleticism is obvious, but he would go through really bad stretches throwing the ball, in the stands. But he's played a lot of football. And so from what I remember watching him last year against the better teams, I saw the Ole Miss game, I saw the Alabama game, Florida State, that he's much more consistent than he was earlier in his career, even his first year at LSU, just the season before.
Well, going back and watching the Alabama game in particular, Mark, he was slicing up that defense before the injury.
Oh yeah.
I mean, now the other thing with him too, it does benefit to play with 2 first-round draft picks at wide receiver. So, I mean, the Neighbors Thomas combination isn't all bad. So, the one thing about him, though, I will say he does seem to be a little slight, and I do wonder I think that's the question about his durability at the next level, though. Too, I've heard that.
So yeah, that's the point I missed on that I was thinking of when you brought up Jaden Daniels. Yes, he's rail thin, and I'm
Yeah,
sure they've done everything possible to fill him out a little bit, even just to play college football. But that said, has he really been hurt? Not with LSU. He's not. I can't recall before that. He might have been a little bit his last season at Arizona State, but the last 2 years he's played every game.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that situation in Washington. That's been kind of a dumpster fire for a long period of time. As far as quarterbacks going there and not having the best as far as development goes. Although the same could be said with the Bears situation and Caleb Williams. I mean, how have the Bears done over the years at developing quarterbacks? Not so
The
well.
the Chicago Bears have to have the worst quarterback history of any team in the league.
Yeah. Well, no coincidence. Their greatest players are defensive players and running backs, right, Mark? That's what they're known for. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
think of the
that's it.
greatest Bears players in the last 50, 60 years, right?
Yeah,
So,
none of them are quarterbacks. Jim McMahon has a Super Bowl championship, and he was not a great quarterback. He was good
right.
when he was healthy, which was hardly ever.
Right, and their greatest team is known for defense and Walter Payton, pretty much. So,
Yes,
th
and
there you
Jim
go.
McMahon acting like a fool, but not anything he did on the field. Now, yeah, who's the Chicago Bears' best quarterback since Sid Luckman? It's Eric Kramer.
Yeah, yeah, he had that, like, I think 1 or 2 decent seasons back in the '90s from what I remember,
He's about the best one I can think of.
right? Alright, I did wanna get into the Ohio State spring game because I didn't get a
Sure.
chance to give you a call after the game was played, Mark, so on to a little bit of college football here. I was, kind of, like a lot of people, I was overly impressed with the defense. I think this defense has a chance, especially adding Downs, who I think could be the best safety in the country to this defense. I definitely feel they're gonna have the best secondary in the country with all they've got returning and adding Downs at safety. I feel really confident about that. Um, I love the D line. I'd love to see Knowles put together a defense where he can play both CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles. I don't see why he couldn't, but I want to see that happen because I think there's a feeling out there amongst Ohio State fans that C.J. Hicks's talents could be wasted, and we could be looking at Baron Browning Part 2. Because I mean, you think about it. Baron Browning has been a far more productive player in the NFL than he's ever was at Ohio State.
Baron
So,
Browning's best run stretch drive was just like the final 4 or 5 games of his last season.
right, right. But and then he's now in the NFL, and he's playing at a much higher level than we ever saw him in Columbus. So I think that's what I'd like to see them do this year. Is like I'd love to see some packages where they get Styles and Hicks on the field together because I think that can be dynamic and cause defenses a lot of problems. I'm excited to see what Kelly can do with this offense. I do expect and hope. Hope and expect, I should say, this offense to be the most heavily run-based offense that Day has had with Henderson and Junkins. I don't know. Is that your inclination as well, or just your thoughts?
Well, it makes sense, but at the same time, I've heard the numbers comparison between Stroud in 22 and McCord in 23, and that was pretty decided. They obviously went in that direction to a certain extent last year. I don't, again, remember the percentages, so I don't know how much heavier they're going to go with the run game. Last year, they threw it. They threw it 377. Almost exactly, I think. Yes, exactly. Okay, 399 times. And they ran it. I would have to add up a zillion carries, so I don't know what the number is here. But the ratio, well, let's just look at the season before. So they had 399 pass attempts in 2023. And then the year before, they threw it 10 more times. So I guess I was wrong, unless we'd have to add up the running plays to see if they just ran less plays the season before. So you may have something to that. Stroud was just obviously so much more effective in his basically same. He threw the ball about 40 more times than McCord last year.
Well, the other thing too is remember every running back was getting hurt in 2022.
Sure.
It seemed like, and that's the other concern. That's why getting Junkins is great because we know what Henderson's track record has been with health the last couple years. So you lighten the workload on him, and you've got a guy that is capable of being a featured back. And I just think that's huge. I do think the situation with Will Howard, I think he can be, and I've said since they've got him, a slight upgrade over McCord. I don't think he's a major upgrade over McCord, but I do think he can be a slight upgrade over McCord. And that's all I think they need. Because when you bring back the entire defense, you add Caleb Downs, you have that much stronger of a running game than you did last year with Junkins in the mix. You don't need him to be that much better than McCord. You only need him to be slightly better than McCord, in my view.
My only concern with them not picking up an elite quarterback, and passing on Kyle McCord, allowing him to move on, we saw Kyle McCord in his first season as a starter.
Right.
So to compare Will Howard, who's going to be working on 2.5 years of starting experience going into this season versus Kyle McCord, he better be better than him. Because McCord was completely inexperienced, number one. Number two, he's a runner, and he provides that ability and access to himself, that option there to take off at any point. So he better be more productive than McCord.
Oh, I tend to agree, Mark. And I don't think they're going to go back to, JT Barrett, Braxton Miller, zone read all the time here. But I do think that, some 3rd and 3 runs, some inside the 5 runs would be really, really helpful going forward. And that's where I think they're going to be in much, much better shape. And the one concern I have with Howard and watching his tape is just, can he avoid and this was the concern with McCord last year, the mistake throw. You know, because I thought that he could have done a slightly better job of taking care of the ball there at Kansas State, and that was my one concern. I like the mobility. I think he can throw the short to intermediate passes pretty well, but it's just I wish he took care of the ball slightly better at Kansas State than he did.
Well, let's consider that last season they threw the ball, meaning McCord and Howard, almost exactly the same number of times.
Right.
Within 9 passes, McCord threw 6 picks and Howard threw 10.
Right. I would add that McCord probably should have had 10 interceptions last year because I know of at least 2 and maybe 3 or 4 interceptions that were dropped, by the way. Now, maybe
Yeah.
you could say the same thing about Howard
Yeah,
too,
we don't
but
know.
right. But in watching McCord as closely as I obviously did, the end of the Notre Dame game, he actually should have had a second pick in the game. Stover broke up an interception in that first quarter. He should have had 2 picks in the first quarter of that game. And I know there was a couple of other games where there were drop picks. I think he had a drop pick in the Minnesota game as well. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah. So my thought about Will Howard is my initial response to watching him play, and I'm almost positive I saw his first meaningful game action because he came in for an injured Adrian Martinez a couple years ago, or was it somebody else before Martinez left Nebraska? Anyway, came into a game, I believe against Oklahoma State, that Kansas State was trailing by
sorry,
like
Mark.
3 scores, and Will Howard comes into the game, and suddenly he breathes life into the offense. And I think I over evaluated him early because it was kind of a shock to see a Kansas State quarterback that could actually, threaten the defense downfield somewhat.
Right.
The more I've gotten to see him play a little bit more, when you talk about utilizing him in the running game, I, I only think that they're going to do that if they're playing a tough opponent. They get into a game in which they see something where the quarterback runs effective and they really need it. But otherwise, I think they're going to try to keep him in the pocket and keep him healthy
Sure.
because they've got too many weapons to let him get beat up. But he's obviously going to take off from time to time and show himself to be more capable as a runner by far than McCord. So that could be a major difference when you've got a quarterback who can pick up a 3rd and 6 because he can break contain and pick it up and keep a drive alive versus a quarterback who's like lost and has to whip it out of bounds or make a bad throw.
Yes, I will say that, and you just hit on the point that's obvious, Mark. The upgrade of weapons, I think, is the big thing for Howard. He's going to have a lot of receivers. He can throw short to intermediate passes, who can do a lot better things with those short to intermediate passes at Ohio State than those receivers ever did at Kansas State. So, I mean,
True.
the obvious receiver upgrade is just it's not even close. I am excited to see what Jeremiah Smith can do, by the way. This might be, by the way, the most hyped freshman I've seen, maybe since Maurice Clarett, Mark. I don't know if you'd go back that far, but have you heard a hyped freshman at Ohio State this much since then?
That's the comparison to make.
Yeah.
No, I can't remember anyone. And then before Claret, I guess it was Andy Katzenmoyer.
Right.
But yeah, he's supposed to be that special. If guys like our trio on Wednesday, Hillwagon, Noon, and Gerdeman can say, after being so used to seeing the best wide receiver room in the country, Wilson, Olave, and the rest of them operate, and then see him be that much better.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say better. Show physical tools that are that much more advanced at the same age, then that's obviously a huge statement.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm excited. I think there's a feeling that he's going to be one of their 2 best receivers this year. Basically, it's going to be him and Igbuka. Although, we really haven't seen much from Tate or some of the other receivers that were part of the class from a year or so ago. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, I'm excited. I think that it. By the way, culture problem. I
Yeah,
just want to
I
say
put
this.
that up there for a
Yeah,
reason, David.
thank you. First of all, I think it says a lot about the culture, and I've said this since it happened, that a lot of the players would come back to Ohio State and want to play and want to compete for a national championship and not leave to go to the NFL. I think that says a lot about the culture. Why would you come
Absolutely.
back to a bad culture and not just go and get paid in the NFL, which a lot of these players could have done?
Thank you. I could not state that any better. So that was going to be point number one for me. Point number two was going to be that if Ohio State has a culture problem and
Yes,
they're playing within a couple plays of a national championship 2 years ago, and then they're playing
right.
within a play of being the number one seed in the playoffs as an undefeated football team, then they must just be that much better than everybody else. If they have a culture problem and they're that good, wow. They
Well,
must be just better than everybody else by far.
think about it, Mark. Three plays when we break it down in the day era. The interception at the end of Clemson, right?
Sure.
The,
Yeah.
the field goal in Atlanta, and then the interception last year in Ann Arbor.
Or just making one more throw at the end. Either way, you want to
Right,
look at that. Yeah.
right. And, you're that close. You're that close. So I will continue to educate the deranged and delusional
Yeah.
TTUN fan base on here, Mark. I'm happy to continue to help.
I
So,
take that as a compliment to Ohio State's talent and on-field development.
hey,
That if they can have a culture problem and be that good, then my
hey,
goodness.
they can come within 6 points up in Ann Arbor against the greatest TTUN team that's ever been assembled in the history of college football with the worst quarterback they've had since Todd Beckman. You tell me, Mark. I don't know how that was done. I don't know how they stayed within 6 points on that field with all that talent up north, but somehow they managed to do it. You
I
know,
would correct you if you weren't spitting facts.
well, again, I'm here to educate your largest fan base, Mark,
You do a
unfortunately. So
fine job.
thank you, my friend. As always, it's a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Have a
Ta-
good night.
Take care of yourself. Bye bye.
All right. Good stuff. Do appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. So we've started to delve into the NFL draft a little bit. We looked at the big picture numbers in terms of best team performances. And then, of course, we looked at the conferences. And then, yes, Ohio State's got a losing problem to Michigan. They've got the same problem that Michigan had to them. So they need to break through. Well, depending on what your goals are as an Ohio State fan, do they need to break through? It's a different landscape suddenly in 2024 and beyond. It is different than anything that we've seen in the past. Sure, there were certain instances in which you could uh, lose to your rival and still accomplish your ultimate goal. That was possible, but we all know what college football has been. You've got to be near perfect, or you need to be perfect sometimes, but you at least need to be one game off of near perfect, one game off of perfect, and that game has to be the right game that you lose. We've seen Ohio State teams and other teams lose the wrong game and miss the playoffs because they lost the wrong game when other teams lost a game that they could lose. Point being, you can go through the last 7 decades of college football and see where Ohio State needed to beat Michigan. Michigan needed to beat Ohio State to reach their specific goals because you had to be a champion of the conference to be playing for a national championship. When this, 1984 with Washington comes to mind. 1984 with Washington as the first and maybe the only team up until the playoff era, that didn't win its conference. They were not the Pac-12 champions. USC was the Pac-12 champion, went to the Rose Bowl. Washington went to the Orange Bowl. And Washington was playing for a possible national championship. Of course, they didn't win it because there was another undefeated team, but they were playing for a possible national championship without winning the conference. But now we're in a completely different world. We're in the NFL world that who remembers who wins division championships in the NFL? I used to have them all memorized. I knew who won the NFC East every year and the AFC Central and all of them. I could, in the 70s and 80s, 90s, I could tell you all of them. But now, what NFL fans care that they only care about it because it pertains to seeding. And once they start the playoffs, who cares who's 10-7, who's 13-4, whatever. Well, welcome to college football. And so Ohio State, yes, has had a losing problem against Michigan 3 consecutive years, which has, in 2 of those years, kept them from being able to achieve their goal. In 2021, they would have gone as the Big Ten champion. We're assuming a Big Ten championship win against a much inferior team in Indianapolis. Ohio State would have trucked Iowa just like Michigan did, and so forth and so on. So they would have gone to the playoff had they beaten Michigan in 21. 22, it didn't matter. They could still have won the national championship. And then here in 2023, same deal. But going forward, unless, I'll use Ohio State as the example, but we could say this about all sorts of teams because this is paramount to this discussion, Ohio State versus Michigan, that unless Ohio State has, for them, somewhat down seasons in which they have to beat Michigan to go to the playoffs because they've lost 2 games or 3 games, maybe, then that game's going to be crucial. But that game is no longer crucial to entry into the playoff and to capturing your ultimate goal. I don't really care for it because to me, it's not what college football has been all of this time, but it's the truth. It is the truth. Badass Buckeye. What year did BYU beat Miami? That would have been 1990. And I believe that was opening weekend. And so, yeah, Todd, I don't like it because I like that everything's on the line mentality, and we can still many of you are going to have that mentality as fans. I'm not taking that away from you. That's up to you. That's up to your emotions as to whether that game is still going to mean everything. It's just not going to logistically, in a practical sense. It's not. We are moving into a new era, and that new era is changing college football rivalries. And this one is the best. It's the most important one because these teams play for championships every year. The other ones, you can't give me another rivalry in college football that has so much riding on it on a consistent basis. And once we got to the playoff era, we then saw Ohio State teams, Alabama teams. Who else? Ohio State again, Alabama again, go to the playoffs without winning their conference. So it's still going to be a huge game. Still going to be important for those teams to win the game most of the time. Sometimes it's not. It's just not. Let's say Michigan's undefeated this year. They're 11-0. They're playing Ohio State. and Ohio State's 10-1, and they're both going to the Big Ten championship game anyway. This is worst case scenario for anyone who loves college football and the importance of these kind of games, not just from a rivalry standpoint, but from a championship standpoint. And for everybody who loves college football and wants these games to be meaningful, not just this game, but all these final weekend games. If Oregon's not who we think they are, and if USC and or Penn State don't step up, and these two teams play like they have the last 3 years, and Ohio State has the last 20 years, they're going to play a rematch. And the more I think about what Michigan has built and who they are this season and who I expect them to be, the more likely I think, I'm not predicting it, we'll have our predictions in August, I wouldn't be surprised to see these teams playing in the Big Ten championship game. Tim is asking, when does college football stay the same? I can't say that I really understand what you mean, Tim. You are welcome to join and ask me that question, and then we can have that discussion. This is the one time, though, in all of college football's various changes through the years, the two things are unprecedented. One is that the expansion of the conferences is going beyond a geographic standard or logic. The regionality of the sport is gone. So these conferences are so large and they encompass so much territory, and they've broken apart conferences. And so the actual size of the conference is going to make for very interesting, but also unfair situations to determine championships within those conferences. But most importantly, the expansion of the playoff, that's been the change that has been so dissimilar to other changes in the past. Is even though we had bowl systems that changed, we had a BCS system, we had a playoff system of 4 teams, we had a very narrow path to a national championship. The standard of excellence was extremely high, even with this 4-team playoff, even though it was doubled from 2 teams to 4 teams. The path to a national championship required excellence. Now, you have to be good. You have to be a really good team with a really good season to make the playoffs. And this is the first iteration of the sport that is going to open up not just the possibility, but the probabilities of rematches all over the place. If you look at last year's college football playoff rankings and you work that into a 12-team playoff, you've got 3 rematches just in the first round. Georgia, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Penn State. I thought there was somebody else out there. So it's a different sport, and fortunately, I don't have to feel guilty, because if I did have influence over this sport, I might feel guilty, because as a 16-year-old, way back in 1984, when I don't know who else was thinking about this stuff, I wrote a paper that was like 10,000 words long. Like, I wrote a huge term paper, not a term paper, whatever it was, in junior high school. I wrote a paper about college football needs a playoff, and this would be my playoff. And I think I don't know if I went 16 or 8. I don't remember. But yeah, I wanted a playoff this whole time because there's an unfair nature to the championship selection. We can go through every year and I can tell you how it's unfair to somebody. However, these are the repercussions that you make it fair or more fair. It's almost fair. It's a little skewed in some directions still, but this is going to be more fair than it's ever been. But it's also going to create watered down matchups in the regular season. And it's going to create situations where teams are not going to finish 4th in their conference and they're going to be playing for a national championship. LFG says that he caught part of a detailed breakdown of the 2024 Oregon Ducks. That squad has holes, defensive line and offensive line. Yeah. They do. That seems pretty similar to our conversation with our buddy Spencer McLaughlin on Locked On Ducks that we had about a month ago. SEC dog, it's hilarious. In September, how many heads explode over Mark's poll? Love the comment, SEC dog. But by the way, it's not a poll. That means that I would be like submitting polls to people taking their no, it's a dictatorship. So it's just a ranking. But anyway, no one remembers who did what in September or October. Yeah, the championships are won in November. However, you have to do the right things. You have to set yourself up for playing the meaningful games in November. If you screw up in September or October, then you don't have a November. Jason predicts, as many do, that Ohio State and Michigan will eventually be the first teams to play 3 times in a season. The way things stand right now, they're the most likely because, number one, so there's a lot of things that make sense based on what Jason has to say here. And I don't know if he's thinking of it the same way, but point number one is just that they're that good. So you got to start with the 2 programs being just 2 of the 5 best programs in the country. Okay, start there. Number 2, they play every year. So you could pick other teams to fill this situation. Alabama, Georgia, for example, but they're not going to play every year. So there may otherwise be a equal or greater likelihood that this would be the case for Alabama, Georgia, but they're not going to play every year. They're going to end up playing. I'd have to look at the SEC format, but it's roughly going to be half the time. So that's point number 1. There are no other elite teams as it stands right now that are playing every year. Oklahoma, Texas would be the closest. Point number 2 is that and that's those are the 2 main points. Number 1, they're the best, and number 2, they play every year. Let's continue with the NFL draft. I am just curious to see who got drafted. This is my first year without the NFL draft. So we were in the 3rd round I had just started the third round. We had gone through these guys. So Caitlin Bullock comes up here going to the Texans with pick 78. And Caitlin Bullock, I was listening to this analysis on Pro Football Focus. These guys were high on Caitlin Bullock, aside from one problem. He's a safety who doesn't like to tackle. So that could be a problem. Matt Goncalves is how you pronounce his last name, is a tackle out of Pitt. I have looked at more ACC football players in the last 2 days than you can shake a stick at. I won't tell you exactly why, but there's a reason that I have been doing deep dive on the ACC. Jermaine Burton, he's played in about as many big games for 2 different programs as you could expect out of anyone over the last few years. And so he goes to the Bengals. He's not an extremely explosive guy, but he knows his craft. We've got a Connecticut guard and an Illinois tight end. We've seen Illinois players already 3 times in the third round. Blake Corum goes to the Rams. So he's going to play cross town from his old coach with the Rams with the 83rd pick. Steelers take Roman Wilson. And then you got Zach Zinter. I do remember this coming up as I was listening to the draft on Friday night. 3 straight Michigan players. Of course, Zach Zinter, we wish him the best as he's coming off that injury. He goes to the Browns. Roman Wilson to the Steelers. Roman Wilson, good little player. Let's see our next college football standout. Marist Liufau goes to the Cowboys. So the Cowboys, about roughly 10 years after taking the great linebacker out of Notre Dame, what was his name, that blew out his knee, but then he turned out to be a really good player. Can't think of his name. Shoot. That got hurt in the Fiesta Bowl. Somebody's going to bail me out on this one. Notre Dame linebacker got hurt in the Fiesta Bowl in 2016. Smith. Yes. All I can think of is Devin Smith. That's not his first name. Good Lord. Yeah. And so the Cowboys basically knew that they didn't have him for the first year. But after that, that he turned out to be an excellent linebacker. Thank you for that, Jackson. Just couldn't think of his first name. Jalen Smith. Yeah. Got hurt against Ohio State. All right. So we've got Tyke Smith, who started at West Virginia, went to Georgia, won a national championship. He's a really good player. Tyron Hopper, linebacker out of Mizzou. Jalen McMillan, part of that Washington trio with Adunze as well. And off the edge, Penn State, this is a good player in terms of not being a super explosive player, but I think that's a great match. Baltimore taking Adisa Isaac. Jackson's hopping in here to talk some college football. Jackson, what's going on tonight?
It's going pretty good, Mark. How you doing tonight on this fine
doing
Saturday?
well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Just getting ready for the month of April to end, and we're getting closer and closer to college football starting.
Absolutely.
Well, I've been thinking about the draft and the quarterback controversy that's going to be happening with the Atlanta Falcons, where when they drafted Michael Penix, and there's like this viral video going around where the GM looked like he was having to explain himself to the owner of the Falcons, like, why'd you draft Michael Penix? Thank you for the future. And if it's for 2024, then it's a bad pick. But if you're thinking about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, it's a good pick, especially if you're not likely to have Kirk Cousins on for the next 3 years.
Can NFL teams, though, especially average, to be kind, average NFL teams, can they really afford to be thinking about 3 and 4 years from now?
That's true, because I mean, they're not the Falcons aren't exactly like the Packers or, the Chiefs or the Bengals or the Eagles. I mean, they're just not. I mean, they're just a team that's just fallen short of having a winning record, or whether they're even going to win the NFC South division. I mean, that division, oh, it is just rough.
Yeah, so
Jordan Jefferson.
I just question them putting a quarterback on hold for that long, especially Michael Penix is not that quarterbacks don't last a long time. Of course they do, but he's one of the older quarterbacks that we've seen in
True.
recent drafts.
Yeah, and especially when they were saying, "Oh, we're happy with Kirk Cousins" a few weeks back. And that basically just tells me they don't know what they really want. And as for the Vikings, I think that they're really thinking with the future. It's going to be very exciting for Minnesota. Because, I mean, when they got rid of Kirk Cousins in March, they were like, okay, Kirk, you can go to free agency. They were basically thinking of drafting a guy like J.J. McCarthy. And I'll tell you what's going to help is that he's going to have Jordan Jefferson at his disposal on offense. I mean, that'll be a fun quarterback wide receiver duo for the 2024 season. McCarthy and Jordan Jefferson going up against Packers twice a year, or the Lions or the Bears. I know that Matt Zemek was saying that the Bears needed to get Roma Dunze just before the Bears got Roma Dunze, and it was their chance to get this pick right at pick number 9. Fortunately, they did. I'm curious to see what that's going to be in 2024. I really hope that Caleb Williams doesn't turn out to be a bust, because I know, like, the Bears, every time we're thinking about their quarterback history, it's not very good. I mean, people can talk about Rex Grossman at his tenure at the Bears, but he wasn't that good. I mean, that one good year he had was 2006. That was it. Jay Cutler had a few good years here and there. Harbaugh was all right at the Bears, but he got better with Indianapolis. But I know there was Sid Luckman from the George Halas era. That was way before my time or my parents' or grandparents' time, honestly.
That was before your grandparents' time? Well, maybe. I guess that could be. Yeah, Sid Luckman's the last Hall of Fame franchise quarterback the Bears had. He's the guy.
I hope Caleb Williams does all right in Chicago, but we'll wait and see what happens. But I was impressed with the Eagles getting Cooper DeJean. That was a pretty good pick. I know that Will was hoping that the Commanders would get him yesterday, but I don't think he's going to be too happy with the Eagles getting him.
Yeah, he was supposed to be a first rounder. He slid to 40, so that's a value pick.
Well, something I always remember is that just because you're not a first rounder doesn't mean you're going to be failing in the NFL. I mean, we've seen it time and time again throughout our lifetimes with the NFL draft, because, I mean, not saying everybody's going to be like Tom Brady, but, we could look at Brock Purdy. Guy was Mr. Irrelevant in his rookie year. We've seen how he's worked out in San Francisco. He's done such a fantastic job over there.
Yeah, that's pretty astounding there because while you're right, you can certainly succeed as a non-first round quarterback. 7th round, though, last player, Mr. Irrelevant. That's, who's who are quarterbacks that have taken teams to Super Bowls that have been lower selected? You've got to go back to ancient times for that. Bart Starr. I think maybe Stan Humphries was undrafted. There were a few guys that were undrafted, but very few.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the top draft steals in the 2024 season. I got a feeling the Rams are happy. And I know that Georgitis, James, and Spiradits are definitely happy with the Rams getting Jared Verse. And there's another guy at Florida State that they got in the second round. Tells me that the Rams really love Florida State. But third round, Matthew Stafford's going to be happy with having Blake Corum at his disposal.
All right, Jackson. Anything else, man?
Oh, that's about all for now. But I am curious about the summer for Colorado. If we're going to be hearing this time for sure, Colorado is going to have a top season in their first season back in the Big 12. That'll be the question going into the summer when the preseason magazines roll out. I will say, though, thank you for having me on, Mark, and you have an awesome night.
Thanks for everything, Jackson. We appreciate you as always. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, let's check out this. Where are we? We're down to the 6th round. Walter Rouse, former Stanford offensive tackle who went to Oklahoma. Logan Lee, really good player, defensive tackle at Iowa. We've discussed him quite a bit in recent years on the Iowa show. Who else jumps out here? Malik Washington caught over 100 passes for Virginia this past season. Johnny Wilson, of course, the transfer to Florida State, and he showed up well. Jace McClellan, the Alabama running back. Absolutely. Mekhi Wingo, really strong player in the SEC at LSU. Dylan McMahon, in doing some of my ACC studies the last few days, I've come across that name. We saw Peyton Wilson on the other side of the ball for NC State. Of course, he's got a very interesting. He's been a tremendous player. He was one of the best players in college football this past year, and very extremely productive at NC State, but has had major knee issues. New England taking a flyer on Joe Milton. Can somebody coach him, bring him around? Ryan Watts, the former Ohio State signee at Texas. He goes to the Steelers. Tyler Davis, one of the best interior defensive tackles in the country. Clemson to the Rams. Will Reichard. We saw Torrey Taylor, the best punter in college football out of Iowa, get selected early. And now we see in the 6th round, Will Reichard, the highest scoring player in the history of college football, selected. Jawar Jordan, excellent player at Louisville at running back. We saw him rip up the Irish on a Saturday night this past season. Another kicker off the board, Cam Little of Arkansas. Jordan Whittington, one of the best players in recent years at Texas. Devin Leary, big season a few years ago at NC State, has had trouble staying on the field since. 35 touchdowns, 5 picks at NC State. And here we go with round 7. Devontae Jean-Baptiste, former Ohio State defensive lineman who went to Notre Dame, goes to the Commanders. Brendan Rice, the great bloodlines there. Colorado to USC to the Chargers. Jaden Davis, a transfer at Miami, who's going to the Cardinals. Jaheim Bell, the South Carolina tight end, who went to Florida State for one season, New England. Matt Lee, one of the best centers in college football. Played at UCF, then Miami, goes to the Bengals. Michael Barrett, part of that outstanding Michigan linebacking duo with he and Junior Colson. Taj Washington, who our guy Matt Zemek loves, is going to the Miami Dolphins. They certainly love speed with the Dolphins. Justin Rogers, tremendous player at Auburn. I've heard people say that Michael Pratt, the former Tulane quarterback, could be the quarterback find of this year's draft. He goes in the 7th round. Devin Culp, who played for the Pac-12 champion Washington Huskies and really came on in his senior season. Darius Henderson, one of the main offensive line transfers that came to Michigan via Arizona State. He goes with a few picks left in the draft. Tatum Bethune, a UCF linebacker who logged a ton of tackles in his career in college, finished up at Florida State. Jalen Harrell had some big games off the edge, especially down the stretch in 2022 at Michigan. There is Cornelius Johnson, another Michigan selection there in the 7th round. Kalen King, one of the best cornerbacks in college football, but of course, that doesn't always translate. And so there are some measurables out there that obviously NFL scouts don't like about Kalen King. And Mr. Irrelevant, usually from a small school, but Alabama's Jalen Key. There you go. John is saying that he believes that Jim Harbaugh had a strong draft. Let's see the Chargers lineup. Top to bottom. So they took Joe Alt. So that's a Harbaugh pick. Takes an offensive tackle, and Joe Alt was not just he had the highest ceiling from everything I understand. Then they made a trade with the Patriots to get Ladd McConkey, who's had some injury issues. Ladd McConkey from Georgia. Junior Colson. So Jim Harbaugh, of course, we could have laid money. I wonder if that was a prop bet in Vegas. Will Jim Harbaugh take a former Michigan player? There it is. Junior Colson. We have Justin. I will not attempt to say his last name, even though with our conversation with Stephen M. Smith on a regular basis, I've heard it enough. Justin Boygby, possibly from Alabama, D tackle. I've got no thoughts on that one. Another trade by the Chargers to get Tarheeb Still. Whether they were trading up or down, I don't know. But yeah, that's a familiar name to Big Ten fans over the last few seasons. Cam Hart. Now, I don't know why Cam Hart is a 5th rounder. Again, I don't evaluate players based on draft potential. I'm a college football guy. But I know that when I first saw Cam Hart play the first couple times, I would have expected him to be a high draft pick. Kamani Vidal, know nothing about him out of Troy. I'm sure he had big numbers, and I'm guessing I've seen him play because I have seen Troy play. I just don't recall Kamani Vidal. And coming out of Troy again, you've got to think that he had a big season or 2 or 3. 1,661 yards and 15 touchdowns. Had 1,000 yards plus the year before for Troy. And then in round 7, if they had another pick, yeah, that's the Brendan Rice selection out of USC. And I don't know what the knock on Brendan Rice is. And then he went Michigan again with another wide receiver in Cornelius Johnson. So evidently Michigan in need of wide receivers. Or, I'm sorry, the Chargers are in need of wide receivers. All right, so finally, in my review of college football spring games on this fine spring afternoon, and of course, rewind the video if you joined us late. Joey Foster joined us right off the top to talk West Virginia football, and we've had a few other callers come in. Rutgers Scarlet defeated the white, Scarlet versus the white, 30-24. So they've got a quarterback battle at Rutgers. Gavin Wimsatt, 8 of 16, 76 yards and a touchdown. Ran for 64 yards on 5 carries. And of course, Gavin Wimsatt is exactly that. He is trying to become a quarterback. He has been a very effective running back, playing quarterback, limiting mistakes. Threw a touchdown to Nasir Montgomery. But Wimsatt, despite leading Rutgers to its best season in at least 10 years since joining the Big Ten, that 2013 team, was it 2013? That 2013 team had a good season. They played Notre Dame in the Pinstripe Bowl, I believe. But they did play Notre Dame in the postseason, since that's the last time that Rutgers had a strong postseason team. They may have made one other bowl appearance, I believe, in the Big Ten since they've been in the Big Ten. Anyway, 7-6, beat Miami. So you've got a successful Rutgers quarterback, successful by their standards, who's got to fight for his job because they brought in Ethan Kalkumanis from Minnesota, where he was the starter. But Kalkumanis has been hot and cold. Now, Minnesota's pass offense hasn't necessarily been a thing of beauty, nor has it been that creative. This has been a run-oriented team. Minnesota under PJ Fleck, and Kalkumanis has completed as a starter going on 2 years, 1 full season and 1 half of season based on the injury to Tanner Morgan, a 53% passer. So he's got to be better. 10 of 17 for $147 and 2 touchdowns, because if it's close at all in throwing the football, it's going to go to Gavin Wimsatt. He's the 2023 starter that led them to a bowl win and a winning season, and he's got the running dynamic. And they just and they play heavy to the run dynamic. They are going to be the most run-heavy team again this year in the Big Ten. So Kalkumanis is going to have to play lights out, I would think, to win the job. They want to stay with their running quarterback. Got an interesting situation with Kenny Fletcher, a defensive end, who they're moving to tight end to be a playmaker. 2 catches, 46 yards. Kalkumanis did throw a touchdown pass to his brother in this game, Dino. And Rutgers' top 2 running backs, Kyle Monangai, who is the Big Ten rushing champion, and Sam Brown, they are the 1-2 punch. They both sat out much of the spring and both sat out this game, but Rutgers very strong along the offensive front and at running back. Greg Schiano has built a solid team, void of playmakers, void of a real quarterback, but a solid team. If they found a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten, and a couple playmakers. Not that they don't have any, but playmaking ability that was top 5 in the Big Ten. They could push the low end of the upper crust, but I'm calling for big ifs here, like a quarterback at Rutgers. So that's the story from Piscataway today. And Greg Schiano made some comments after the game about it being the biggest turnout for a Rutgers spring game, but I saw no numbers on that, so it might have been 350 people. Who knows? All right, everyone. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. It's been a good night of NFL draft and spring football talk. Please check us out all over our network coming up on Monday. So you will probably not see me on Sunday, but you will see our College Football After Dark crew. And you can be on that College Football After Dark show. You can show up and be a mainstay on the panel by being a Patreon member or a member of the Voice of College Football community here on YouTube, which does remind me that I got to get a Discord link out to all those fine folks who were gifted memberships here in the last few days. So my apologies there. So everyone who has been gifted a membership or maybe just became a member on your own here in the last week, I'm going to send a private message on the community page to all of you that will have the Discord link and all of the other benefits. I also wrote myself a note to look into this Florida State 13-0 rings deal. My Florida State contingent and my buddies over on the Florida State channel, James, Chris, and George, may not be real happy with me, but this sounds like something I'm going to tear to shreds. If they are buying rings that say 13-0 when they didn't go 13-0, that deserves some Voice of College Football ire. On Monday, that's the next time you will see me most likely, but I will be working on Sunday, working hard, pushing this thing forward, but you will probably not see me, although our next video will most likely be the top 10 non-conference games for 2024 and then the under the radar games for 2024. And then I think we will push ahead to our all-time program rankings. So next up, most likely, unless the spirit moves me otherwise, top 10 matchups out of conference 2024, and then the under the radar matchups for 2024. And then we will size up the all-time program rankings, and we will do a live stream once we release all of those, and we will have one heck of a discussion with all of you, I'm sure, and call-in show on the all-time program rankings. All right, coming up on Monday. On Monday, wake up with me. I know that could be a scary thought. I understand that. But through the magic of the internet, you can do it. So wake up with me and think of it this way. Wake up with some of our fine friends here at the Voice of College Football, like D-Rock Irish and Jackson and others. So wake up college football. For a third week, I'm going to be rather interested to see what this looks like going into the season. It's a little light, fluffy show where we go down a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of trails, chasing all sorts of talk about breakfast foods and who ran into who and who did what. And yeah, it's just a bunch of small talk. But we do go through the college football headlines. Now, once we get close to the season, get into the season, I think we're going to have a pretty hardcore breakfast conversation looking at the college football headlines every day. But for right now, a bit light and fluffy, as we have presented here on our nice little graphic. So please join us Monday through Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I would like to thank our buddy Jackson. He has gifted a Voice of College Football membership to somebody. And with that, you get the Discord link to talk college football with the rest of the community and other benefits like that. You will get to request exclusive content, and you get the Discord link and so forth. I thought I was done. I thought I was done tonight. All right, we got Tim dropping by. Before we get to Tim, Monday, yes, 8:00 a.m. Eastern, 5 on the West Coast. If you're an early riser on the West Coast, we'll wake you up. Then we've got the transfer portal update live at 3:00 Eastern. We've got the Texas show at 7. Then on Monday night at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, it's escaping me right now. We've got a show Monday at 7 Pacific, but it's escaping me. Tim, can you help me out? Do we have a show Mondays?
I think that is the Elvis Presley. The Elvis Presley review by Mark Rogers, where he goes through some concert footage, breaks it down for you guys as only he can.
Don't tempt me. I'll start the channel immediately. No, we have the best USC show, and I'm biased. I know Tim's got some favorites out there, and we've got some great connections with some amazing USC channels out there. So I'm not in any way discounting them, but I get to talk to Matt Zemek and Tim every Monday. It's at 7 Pacific time.
We got to leave Matt about 20 minutes to explain how Taj Washington dropped to the 7th round and how he's going to be the biggest steal in NFL history.
He loves Taj Washington.
But he's got a good point. I mean, I was pretty shocked that he dropped that far, to be honest. But the issue with Taj Washington is he just doesn't have that speed. He's that guy, good hands, get good routes, gets open, can settle into zones. 3rd down, he was money last year. I mean, without Caleb Williams and Taj Washington last year, I don't want to know what that SC offense would have looked like, really. So we'll see. Yeah, that'll be a fun conversation. Yeah, but Matt was really high on him. I'm not that Matt didn't think he should go high. Like, he didn't think he was going high in the draft, but he did say he'd be a steal somewhere. And I don't think that Matt foresaw him dropping in the 7th round. But I'm gonna go back to my comment about what did I say? Oh, about that, just college football. I mean, I know we could say, well, if everything stays the same, it looks like it's be another Michigan versus Ohio State battle for the Big Ten championship. But I mean, when you have a really hot Oregon team coming, God, it hurts me to say it. I can't say that. A good Oregon team coming in, you have a USC team that is on the way up. A deeper Big Ten just got a little more deep. And we know it's not about individual battles. It's that going through a grind of X amount of tough games. And now you add 1 or 2 or 3 more tough games onto a schedule. It may not be the same kind of run that you used to see in the Big Ten with certain teams. So I'm just saying things change in college football, especially when you bring 3 teams. I mean, if you look at those draft picks, a lot of them came from those 3 teams. I can't include UCLA because they only had 2.
So first of all, I didn't know what you meant when you posted that. Secondly, I was just commenting in response to our buddy, I think it was Chris, who commented about, Jason made the comment that he was expecting Ohio State and Michigan to be the first 2 teams to play 3 times in a season. I don't know who's going to be the first, but I know that they're going to be in the same conference, of course, and they're going to have to be really good teams and excellent programs. And that's the most obvious. that's the most likely one for it to be the first one and to be the most frequent one as things stand right now.
Right. Yeah.
For one thing, they play every year, so that gets you one game. We don't know that USC and Ohio State they're going to play at roughly half the seasons. So USC, we could fast forward in 10 years and any combination of teams could be the most dominant over the next decade. And my bet might be Ohio State and Michigan, or Ohio State and USC based on history. So let's say it is Ohio State and USC. They are the two most dominant teams over the next 10 years, but they're not going to play every year. So they wouldn't play 3 times.
But every other year they would. So every other year they got the chance. And really with a 12-team playoff, and when they expanded again, because they're going to, when it gets to 16, then the odds of that triple are going to get a lot bigger. Because you could have all kinds of combinations playing, Well, I mean, the way it's set up now, right, is everyone basically plays every other year they play each other, right? That's really the way it's kind of set up as of right now. Is that right?
Unless except for those permanent rivals that you play, USC, UCLA. I think that's USC's only permanent rival that they're.
And do they have it staggered? Does everyone have the same amount of permanent rivals, or no? There's
no. It's all
I mean, that's got to change. That seems well, because you could seriously game the system with the way you're going to be scheduling it. I know that having certain matchups that makes sense is good, but so Ohio State just has what? What are Ohio State's? So
Michigan.
You have Michigan.
That might be it.
Okay,
I think.
And then Penn State. What does Penn State have?
Penn State has no one. They didn't give them any. On the other hand, on the flip side, Iowa has 3.
And who are they?
Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska. I agree with it.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, you do want to preserve those. You do want to preserve those rivalries, but I mean, I don't know.
As long as that's being taken into consideration when building the rest of the schedule, to say, okay, our expectation this year or the recent trends are that their rivals are weak, so we need to compensate, or vice versa. What I don't like about what's been done in the past, Tim, in the SEC and the ACC, they had 2 divisions and they had rivals, and some of them were legit. And that's the reason why they had these cross rivals, but they just force fed the rest of them a rival that made no sense. So each one had one that they always played. And many of them, why do you need to do that? Alabama and Tennessee should play, and Georgia and Auburn should play. And then the rest of them made no sense and didn't need to be scheduled. There's nothing magical about Texas A&M and South Carolina having to play every year. That's just doesn't make any sense.
A lot of the SEC scheduling for a number of years hasn't made it's made a lot of sense if you want to game the system.
Well,
it hasn't made a lot of sense as far as putting out compelling football games. It did a really good job of producing national champions, as we've seen. Yeah,
you're going the out of conference route. I'm talking about in conference scheduling. You cannot select 2 teams in the SEC that have less to do with one another than South Carolina and Texas A&M. Yet they are rivals. They were for 12 years.
Well, I mean, so how often in the regular season does Georgia play Alabama?
Well, it's a new deal now. I don't know.
But before, over the past 15 years?
Once every 6 years.
Right. You see what I mean? Are you even really in the same conference when that's happening, really? I mean, it doesn't even seem like
every 6 years.
Yeah, that's what I mean about the gaming, even within conference. I mean,
and to show how ridiculous, to make it a better example, think about over the course of 60 years. Now, this only went on for 12 or 13 years, but had it gone on, no, I'm sorry. It's gone on since 1992. It went on for 30 years. That over the course of 30 years, Auburn's going to have to play Georgia 30 times. They play them every year, and Alabama's only going to have to play them 10 times.
Yeah. That's again, we're not going on the road before. I see you, Darrell. I see you. I'm not saying that you didn't have some of the best teams over the past 15 years. You certainly did. And you put a lot of people in the NFL. But I am saying, if you want to manufacture national champions, you got to look at just the way that it has been done, because the SEC gamed the system. They just did. It's just like it's a video game analogy. It's like there's like the outright like cheats, where you're and then there's exploits in the game where you can like kind of, there's certain little things you can do over and over. I remember the biggest one I remember is like the patterns and Mike Tyson boxing. You had a certain, every time you knew the one thing and boom, you'd have it. That wasn't cheating. That was just exploiting the limitations of a game. It's the same thing the SEC's done. They didn't cheat in their scheduling. There was no rule against what they were doing, but they exploited a system to where their top teams didn't have to play each other very often in conference, obviously.
See, I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying. I think the result
once every 6 years.
So the result of what you're saying is true. That's how it wound up. But they did this back in 1992. There was no Georgia dynasty in 1992. Georgia was no better than any Georgia, Tennessee. There was 5, 6, 7, Florida, Alabama. Alabama wasn't even Alabama, although they won a national championship in 1992. For the next 10 years, they were pretty awful. They simply split into 2 divisions and said, Alabama and Tennessee are in opposite divisions, but this is a great rivalry. They have to play every year. Auburn and Georgia, it's the oldest rivalry in the South. They have to play every year. So we're going to do that with everyone. So now Mississippi State has to play Kentucky every year, even though there's no connection between. So all they did was match up teams. The ACC did the same thing. So like half of them made sense and the other half didn't make sense, but they just, where my suggestion was, ensure that Auburn and Georgia are going to play every year. It's a great rivalry. Ensure Alabama, Tennessee, but why do you have to do that with everybody else? I agree with your gaming of the system out of conference. I totally get that. You're on mute.
You play everybody pretty much every other year. 1 year, when you don't play someone that's in your conference for like 3, 4, 5 years at a time, it just doesn't seem like you have. It's just the conference is so loosely knit that it's not really that you have a conference. You have a group of people that
are going to
play for a championship at the end.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I completely agree with that. I'm just saying the incentive isn't necessarily, I don't believe, to be what you believe it to be, because back in 1992, Georgia football they were okay, they were good, but they weren't Georgia of now. So there was no like thought that, okay, we don't want Alabama and Georgia to play because they're the 2 best programs. They weren't the best programs.
Well, I mean, I'm missing. There was a scheduling set up way back then, and that's why it's the way it is. I'm just wondering why a lot of the teams in the SEC just never play each other. That's all I'm saying. That's not the only example. There's a number of teams out there that
there's tons of examples.
Whereas like you play in the Big Ten or the Pac-12 that I speak to, because I know the most about it, is like every other year you're playing pretty much everybody in your conference. You're not going to go 3, 4, 5 years at a time without like the USC playing like Oregon, for instance. So they're not going to go 5, 6, 7 years without playing Oregon.
To highlight the point, on the flip side, Alabama was only playing Vandy once every 6 years.
It's not like Vandy is the only team in the conference that's not very good. I mean, there's also
they're the obvious example.
Sorry, I got a lot of background noise. Yeah, I'm not here to argue it. I mean, we could do this all day long. The fact is their scheduling was very creative, and it did set up a lot of systems where their better teams didn't have to play the better teams in the conference. That's all I'm saying. And then it was a conference of scheduling where their teams would play each other maybe, a handful of times over a 12-year period. And again, to me, that just doesn't seem like you're in a conference. You're just a bunch of people that have an affiliation together. I know I'm being some,
I would say actually that it's not creative.
No, why not?
Okay. In 1992, this is what happened. The SEC added South Carolina and Arkansas. So in 1991 and prior, there was just an SEC from top to bottom, 1 through 10. In 1992, they added 2 schools, so they decided to split into 2 divisions. They were the first conference to split into 2 divisions. So their scheduling formula was everyone's going to play against everyone in their division. And then we're going to preserve these rivals cross division. And then there's going to be a rotation of all the other teams. That's simply what it is.
Well, no. And that's a big part out. We're only going to play 8 conference games.
True.
Well, that's a big and.
The ACC was doing the same thing, 8 conference games. The Big Ten was only playing 8 conference games for a long time.
Well,
the SEC just continued to do it, and so did the ACC. They're still playing 8 conference games.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's called gaming. It is what it is. It's just gaming.
I'm just explaining their scheduling process.
Mark, I'm not upset. We're talking more about SEC that I really care about. The times are changing. The times are changing. I don't care what anyone wants to say about, SEC football can be great forever. And it's not. It's just not, because we're already seeing it with this draft. You're going to see that with NIL. You're going to see it now that everybody can pay their players. Now that everyone can pay players to come to your school, a lot of this is going to change a little bit. You can't stack your rosters like you used to be able to because of the portal. So you can't have like defensive lineman after defensive lineman after defensive lineman on the same unit. You can't do that anymore. You're going to lose some other teams. So the depth goes away. I'm just saying, a lot of the advantages that certain conferences had are now gone and equalized. And if they think it's because of superior coaching and better players and blah, blah, we'll see, because, we're just going to see.
DeReal would like to speak with you, and we're
sure.
going to put this on a definite pitch count. But here's DeReal. Hello, sir.
Hello, Mark. Hello, Tim. How are you two gentlemen doing this evening?
Doing great.
I'm doing fantastic.
So there's a specific claim you made in there that said there were SEC teams that manufactured titles. Which teams got a manufactured title? So if they played a harder schedule, you don't think they would have won it all?
Did I say that the teams manufactured a title? If I did, I misspoke. I meant the conference did a good job of manufacturing titles.
Okay,
no,
so
I mean, listen. So there's certain teams like 19 Bama, 21 Georgia. I don't think 11 Alabama. What's that really good Alabama team? Was that 2011?
Oh, there's been a lot of them.
Well, but I mean the one that was like really just
2011.
lights out, like just blowing everything away. There are teams out there that and the SEC has been the best conference. What I'm simply saying is really great teams can get tripped up in a season, but if your conference is taking care of you and scheduling it right, those slip-ups on great teams can't happen. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, in theory, this makes sense, but do you have any tangible examples to point to, say, hey, this team, if they would have played Auburn, they could have lost?
That's not tangible? That in itself is a hypothetical. We can go through all the hypotheticals.
Well, I'll give you a tangible example.
DeReal, you asked me a question, and I'll be honest with you. I really don't give a shit enough to go down that road or research it. I'm just simply saying play 9 conference games. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I'll raise you one, Tim. The SEC one time played 10 conference games. Okay, they played 10. They played more than 9. 10 is bigger than 9. And Alabama won the national championship that year. So if it's this idea, there's a correlation between more conference games and winning the national championship. The one year the SEC had 10 conference games, more than the Big Ten, the SEC won it all.
You know, statistically, having one data point isn't really a strong argument. It's just one.
It's the only data point we have. I have at least the data point. You have a hypothetical scenario.
So everything is hypothetical in this whole conversation we're having.
How?
We don't know.
It's an actual thing that happened in 2020. The SEC literally played 10 conference games.
Okay. And
Alabama won it all.
So
who's in the SEC?
You have one data point, and therefore you're going to stand by one data. Look, I think
that's better than a hypothetical.
Every time on this show, we have these conversations, and I must go over it really quickly again. Over the past 15 years, the SEC has been the most dominant program. All I'm saying is there's a nice big fat stain on this dominance you guys had because you only played 8 conference games a year. Period. Anything can happen in a game. You know, teams, these called upsets, the real. They do actually happen. And some of these really great teams, and then the second part, you follow college, everyone here follows college football. If you have an extra conference game, that means you're not sitting your guys at halftime or sitting your stars out the entire time. There's injuries, there's wear and tear on your players. There's a lot that goes into just even one extra game added to it. And what happens if you lose your starting quarterback in that extra league game, that extra conference game you play, you lose your quarterback? That's why these things are hypotheticals. Over time, it does wear on your team every season playing one more conference game. How could you argue that?
Because I don't think it's going to be like Alabama's playing Georgia or these top 5 matchups. Alabama could be playing South Carolina or some cupcake team they win by 40 just as much as they play this elite team. I mean, to me, it's like if we said Ohio State. You know, Ohio State, if they added a 10th conference game, that would have been an extra data point. It depends who you play and the caliber of competition. It doesn't have to do with how good in conference or anything.
Yeah, we go back to that, the better players, the better teams, when you usually have like 2 or 3 to 4 really dominant teams and a bunch of crap mediocre after that.
Well, I mean, 60-42 is pretty significant. Mark?
Considering you play like, you know, half of your conference, you don't even play a majority of your conference. I mean, it gets kind of ridiculous to say, well, look how great all these teams are when you don't even play the majority of them.
But they all, outside of Vanderbilt and Arkansas and Mississippi State this year, were really like pretty good teams. They were top 40 teams.
Top 40. So I'm not here
I had this conversation yesterday. Listen,
so it gets really boring and stale when you want me to argue. Again, I'm just saying times are changing.
Can you provide examples? Because this year, today,
you're enjoying your 15 years, but it's 15 years. So have fun with it.
I mean, that's fine, but 60-42 is 60-42 too.
Again, outside of Alabama, USC has a winning record against everybody in your conference, so I'm not impressed.
Well, you're debating conferences, not teams. Obviously, USC is an elite team and at their power, they're probably the highest reaching team.
A matter of fact, just outside of Alabama and Notre Dame, USC has a winning record against every single team they played more than twice.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, when they had it rolling, they had it rolling. Like,
well, I mean, that's historically, that's like forever over all the decades. They have 2 teams that have winning records against them.
Yeah, USC is a great program. They're one of the greatest programs of all time. I'm not going to argue against that point. That would be foolish.
The Big Ten just got a lot better. The Big Ten just added a couple of pieces and, well, 3 solid pieces. And then there's UCLA. They throw them in just to make things even. But they got 3 solid programs coming into the Big Ten, already strong with you know, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. You know, Iowa's eventually going to figure it out. You know, between Wisconsin, it's either going to be a situation where Wisconsin gets better or Nebraska gets better. You know, that's going to happen. And so the Big Ten, I think, is going to be the best conference in football. And we can debate that all you want. Because you know what? You don't have any data points because that's the future.
I mean, it is the future. So I got to look at the past examples of what these teams have been.
The past doesn't matter. We're talking about the future.
Okay, so which team do you think is most likely to be a dynasty going forward?
How many national championships? Wait, let me think here. 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, never mind.
Mark, do you have anything to say while Tim's doing his math?
No, I think you and I had this discussion just the other night.
Yeah,
So,
I know. Well, Tim kept
my
trying to
thoughts on
just
this are
poke
very
the
plain,
bear,
and
talking about, and
I understand
All I'm
not
saying is you
everyone's
get to
here
play
all the
9
time.
conference games. That's
So
all I'm saying.
so
sit
I
with
guess
you.
the Florida State Clemson titles don't count as well because they only played 8.
Here's my question to you. When did I ever say that any of those national championships didn't count?
Okay, they were manufactured.
Okay, that's not the same thing. They count. They were just crafted in a way that was very strategic and very smart. I didn't say they were invalid. Matter of fact, I was very clear to say that they didn't cheat. They followed the rules. They did an exploit. They didn't cheat.
You're right, but you understand when you use the word manufactured, there's like this conspiracy type element to that word that you're putting into it.
Nothing conspiratorial about it. It's within the rules. Your conference decided you're going to play 8 conference games, and you ran with it. That's not
right.
That's not a conspiracy. That's a fact.
That is true, but when you say manufactured, there's this negative connotation toward the word, as if these titles are lesser than the titles from conferences.
I would have more respect if you're playing the same playing field that the rest of college football is playing on. Yeah, and that includes ACC teams that were playing at 8. So yeah.
Okay, but so this year, going forward in the future, 2 of the conferences are at 8 games. So 50% of the Power 4 is at 8 conference games. Are they now on the same playing field? Since
there is no Power 4. Let's stop being silly.
Okay, then half of the Power 2 is playing 8 conference games.
Uh-huh.
So is that a level playing field since 50% is doing it?
Look, I really, honestly, I'm not too worried about. I've never, you know me, Daryl. When have I been a conference guy? I don't give a crap about conference. It's about, if my team wins the national title, I'm stoked. If my team wins our conference, I'm stoked. We win our bowl game, I'm stoked. That's all I care about. I don't care about my conference is better yours. You know what? Because I hate when most of my conference wins. I think it's weird you guys all pull for each other. I think that is odd. Big Ten, I'm coming in. I'm not going to be rooting for you guys. We're competing directly with you for recruits. Why on earth would I want to see Ohio State or Michigan have a great season, and then we're competing against the same for the same quarterback, the same defensive tackle, the same left tackle? Why on earth would you want your competition to win? I don't get it. Makes no sense whatsoever competitively.
Well,
you don't have to be, like, you give an example there. You don't have to be in the best conference to win a national title. You just got to be the best team in football.
That's true. We saw Michigan last year win the national championship, and they weren't in the best conference, and they also cheated.
Oh, they might have been. They might have been the best conference.
No, they weren't in the best conference last year.
They might have been.
I mean, they might have, but they weren't. So,
what do you mean?
The SEC had better results than the Big Ten. That's what I mean by that comment.
The only way you could ever know which one's better and why it's all hypothetical is because unless every team lines up and plays each other and you look at the end, who had the most wins, you don't know who's better.
You're right. I don't have an exact formula for if Vanderbilt played every single team in South Carolina and so on and so on.
Good night, everybody. Okay, cool. All right. Look, Daryl, I'm mostly tongue in cheek, but I do think the idea there was a shining moment in Camelot when the SEC was the only dog in the fight, and it was basically, okay, who's going to win the SEC? Because then we know pretty much, who's could probably win the national championship. That's not the case anymore. It just isn't.
I mean, Ohio State exists, so that's true.
Yeah, and Michigan just won national championship last year.
Yeah, and they were an admiration of fluke.
And Ohio State was a field goal away from, they should have beat Georgia. They had a field goal kicker that would be 2 years in a row for the Big Ten. And that's not a big stretch. I mean, when it comes down to a last-minute field goal, that's not like, one play, whatever. No, that's pretty much, it would change the entire narrative. All they had to do is hit a field goal. It's not like those games in the past where Ohio State or another team has walked in and got their asses kicked by the SEC.
That is true.
How are you doing tonight?
Hey guys,
can we have like a 3-minute debate here? I'm not going to say a word. It's
Well,
between
I
you three.
would love Tim to walk me through when Southern Cal was this power in the 2000s. Kind of walk me through that Burma road that his Trojans had to go through in the early 2000s in the Pac-12. Because I can't remember a single game that they played during that time.
Okay. I mean, you want me to go through the entire? Well, I'll tell you one thing. The only teams that could beat USC and Pete Carroll on a run was within their own conference, because no one else was touching them except for the 2006 Rose Bowl, which we all watched. But beyond that, and even then, it was just
It's true.
injury. And here you go. You know what? You guys want my evidence? Hold on. You asked me a question.
Who was the big power? Who was the big power?
Hold on a minute. So you asked me a question. Let me answer it.
Yeah.
So I'll look at 2000. I'll go to 2000 and the 2005 season with Pete Carroll, and they got to that Rose Bowl, and they had 6 guys, 3 of them starters out, injuries, because they're playing in a conference where they play 9 games and they lost players. So therefore, you get to a game like that Texas game at the end of the season, and because you played a full 9 conference and with real non-conference games, so basically 10 of your games are lights out games, you're going to have, at the end of the season, you're going to have significant injuries.
Okay,
so there you go.
If I may, Porter,
Yeah,
I may be help Porter and Darrell. I may be helping your argument. If I could just
tell me about that Pac-12 championship game that you played in 2005.
Well,
that's quarter. We played everybody in our conference, so we didn't need a championship.
We've had a conference championship game since 1992, dude.
That's
so to
great.
be fair, Tim. So to
It's
be
because
fair,
you don't play everybody in your
Tim,
conference.
the SEC was playing those championship teams. Were playing a 9th conference game by playing a conference championship game.
Thank you.
And
Exactly.
they were playing an extra game.
Thank you. Tim, you care to tell me about that Pac-12 championship game you played in 2005?
Porter, Porter, I think you're one of the stupidest people on this channel, so I don't really want to talk to you, actually.
Okay, because you can't debate me, buddy. You can't debate me.
Call into the show.
What's that?
So I don't even want to talk to you. If you've noticed in the past, I pretty much ignore you now because, well,
when you can't debate somebody, you just ignore them.
I just brought up a
legitimate
away from only
argument.
having one national title on your great run. There you go.
What's that?
I can't make it more clear than that.
What'd you say?
I can't make it more clear than what I said. You were a shanked field goal away from having one national title on your big run.
Well, didn't you have 2 national championships and one of them was shared?
Shared?
Is that right? With
shared?
LSU?
You think anyone's beating that 2003 Trojan team? Really?
Well, I think you lost a game, didn't you?
Really?
Didn't you lose the game in 2003?
And
Tim will say crap, and then when someone checks him, he can't back him up. He just calls him stupid. Because you know what, Tim, you
go down in history as what they are. Porter, you can run your mouth all you want, but I don't have to defend Pete Carroll, those Trojan teams. Opening up to those teams, you sound like an idiot.
Well, let me think. Who did you lose to in 2003? Help me, remind me.
Porter, I don't want to talk to you. He brought you on. I would never
because
bring
you can't debate me, man. Because I'm eating your lunch. You're eating your lunch.
You're trying to bait USC's national championship over your national championship as if that's going to prove anything. You're saying it was
because you said no. You said who's beating that 2003 team? The mighty.
Let me educate you, Porter. I'm going to mute you in a minute if you keep talking over me.
How are you going to mute me, man? How are you going to do that? Because you can't beat me in a debate, dude.
I'm going to mute you like that. In 2004, USC was 2003. Sorry, in 2003, you have a situation where USC is the best team at the end of the year. They just simply are, and they're left out of that game.
We're going to unmute.
They should not have been left out. Huh?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to shout over him, Mark. This isn't a circus. This isn't some show. If Porter wants to sit and talk, but I'm not having him talk over me.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's a
Southern
moron.
Cal.
Okay, I'm going to talk, and nobody else is going to talk for just a couple seconds here. Just let me get a word in, because yes, we don't want people talking over each other. We want a fluid conversation, but it doesn't do any good for anybody in the chat or anyone listening if people are talking over each other. So Tim is correct. We should have each person making their point at the same time. The one thing I will say about what Tim just stated, though, is just stating over and over that USC was the best team in 2003 doesn't make them the best team. Of course, they were one of the best teams, but we did not get to see USC and LSU play. So there is no way to prove who the best team was. There is absolutely no way to prove that.
Who was ranked number 1 in both polls, Mark?
You're talking to me about AP voters.
Both polls. Yeah,
I don't
am.
care who was voted the best.
No. There was nobody voted the best. I'm saying at the end with the BCS, the reason why USC wasn't in that shared title, as Porter wants to call it, is because they were left out. They were number 1 in both polls.
Absolutely.
That's never happened. And one more thing, no team has ever gone into their bowl game ranked number 1 and won the game and not been the national championship.
And that is not proving, none of that is proving that USC would have beaten LSU. All that is proving is that we should have seen that game, but we didn't get a chance to see that game. So LSU fans have every right to say we are the national champions, and USC fans have every right to say we are the national champions, because that was the format at the time.
That's just stupid.
Now, can I talk?
No, it's not stupid. That's what it is.
Can I talk?
Sure, Porter. I wanted to be
well,
off
first of
45
all,
minutes ago.
first of all,
so we're going to have to continue.
We'll listen to Porter spout his mouth for 5 more minutes, and we can all go.
Now, see, this is kind of thing. I mean, listen. He says these things, and then I check him, and I'm beating him.
You're not checking anything, Porter. Just get your point out.
Can I talk?
Just get your point out.
Listen. I'm beating you in this debate. Every point you have made.
You're scoring it for yourself. Good job. Make your point so we can go.
So you called me. What'd you call me? An idiot or stupid or something like that?
I'll let everyone else decide that one.
This type of name calling is ridiculous, man. I'm giving you facts, and then you go and you make insulting comments about me. All I'm doing is giving you facts. And so, Mark, I'm kind of disappointed that you let someone name call somebody who's a regular caller.
Settle down.
When all I'm doing is giving you facts. There is an SEC championship game at the end of every season. I don't care if there has been 8 conference games. Yes, the Pac whatever played 9 conference games in the 2000s when you had your run. Great. Guess what? You didn't have a conference championship game. The SEC did. So I don't know what I don't know what kind of comparison you're trying to make.
Okay, I'll say it again. We played everybody in our conference. Let that sink in. Every single team in our conference was played. Now,
great.
Now, when you play your championship game back then, I don't know, it's fuzzy for me. Are you guys playing 1 versus 2 in the conference?
We're playing the champion of the West versus the East.
Right. So when you play in the Pac-12 in the Pete Carroll years, you played every single team in your conference. You couldn't duck anybody.
Wow, man. There were so many great teams back then, too.
There were.
Oregon State was just such a juggernaut, and so was Cal. I think Cal was the one that beat you guys in 2000.
Y'all heard of Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I'm aware of Aaron Rodgers.
Quarterback.
I'm aware that Cal
on the road in double overtime on a fumble.
Since I have been,
it was a loss early in the season. And they Bears. I still don't know what your point is. They were ranked number 1 in both polls at the end of the season, Porter, and they played every single team in their conference.
The Cal Bears.
I talk about 8 teams and dodging teams, and we played another game. We played another team from the other side of the conference. That doesn't guarantee you're playing the second best team or playing everybody in your conference. There could have been somebody in your conference, because also in football, it's not just about the best teams that win. Sometimes you play a team that's really good at what you're not good at. And that's why it's really cool when you play the entire conference, because then you know how you're well-rounded you are, because you played every single team and you beat them.
The Cal Bears.
That's the thing.
I'm 54 years old. In my lifetime, Cal has never been to a major bowl game in my lifetime. That was who beat
Are
y'all.
you saying? Oh, wait, hold on. So I just want to be very clear. You saying those Tedford Cal teams weren't good teams? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, tell me where they finished.
Is that what you're saying?
Okay, who were the ones? Who were the best teams in the Pac-12 or Pac whatever when you made your run between, let's just say 2002, back when you won the Orange Bowl, all the way through, let's say 2004. Who were the best teams in the Pac-12 at that time?
We didn't just have one really dominant team like the SEC pretty much did for 15 years. We had a bunch of really good teams during that time.
Okay, yeah. Please name them.
Please name them.
Yeah,
early on there was some really good. Well, you asked me a question. Now shut up. Hey, listen, you asked a question. Now shut up. So early on, there were some really good Mike Price teams. By the way, and then you had some really good Cal teams that you're discrediting. I don't know what you're thinking, because those were really good, very, very good Cal teams. Then there were some really good Oregon teams that came along. I don't know what you're talking about. You think you're so drinking your moonshine, your hooch, that you forget about the fact that there's a world outside of your SEC.
Okay, so Oregon was.
Are you trying to tell me there were no good teams in the Pac-12 during that stretch? Because let's talk about outside of conference. Let's talk about outside of conference, where USC actually plays people with pulses, unlike your team.
That's the point I'm trying to make, because I remember the great run that Southern Cal had. In fact, I like Southern Cal. I've always liked Southern Cal. I love the Blue Bloods, and I love this sport.
Really don't care.
I've always liked Southern Cal, but I'm trying to remember back.
You were so backhanded with all of your. Listen, the reason why I stopped talking to you is you're all about USC early on, and yet everything that comes out is always a backhanded compliment or a but or an or, dude. It's kind of boring to listen to you. Actually,
I like those teams. I mean, I like those teams.
Sure, you do. Yeah,
but I don't remember a single Pac-12 game. I remember you beat Notre Dame. That was a great game in 2005.
Would have smoked Georgia. Smoked them.
What's that?
Smoked them.
When?
Those SC Carroll teams would have smoked Georgia.
I don't know about that. That 2002 team was 13-1, won the Sugar Bowl. I think we would have given Carson Palmer a game in that game. So we had some pretty good
things. Mark? Because I have no interest in this whatsoever. Didn't have any. Once the reel left, I was kind of done.
So I cannot speak for Tim Porter, but on behalf of the channel, we do apologize. We should not name call. We should just debate and let it speak for itself.
I don't understand. Thank you. I don't understand. I've always liked him. I mean, he's a very knowledgeable guy, and we've always got along. I don't know why he would. I don't know why he would call me stupid on this thing. He knows. Everybody that's on this forum knows I'm very knowledgeable about our sport.
You let us all know, apparently.
What's that?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Well, I've had dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations with Porter, so I can vouch for Porter's knowledge on college football.
So, I mean, my whole thing is, if someone's going to debate me, I'm going to come up with facts. And when Tim gets on here and says, "Oh, they only played 8 conference games for all these years," I'm going to say, "Wait a minute, man. We played all 8 games." But then we play an SEC championship game, so we do play 9 conference games. So all I'm doing is defending what has been accomplished, not just from my school.
2 teams
from.
Yeah, okay, dude.
What's that?
2 teams in your conference.
Tim,
2 teams. Hold on, settle down. You said what? 2 teams in your conference play 9 conference games. The rest of your conference plays 8 games.
The only team that has not played 9 conference games that won a national championship was Alabama in 2011. I guess they did play 9 because they had to play LSU in the national championship.
Are we just talking about national champions, or are we talking about the best conferences? Because when we talk about best conferences, we talk about the entire conference and the season they have, and the fact that they have one less game in conference that bangs and beats them up. So when they get to the end of the year, when you play your real game, and like you play a bowl game or a tough game, and you're at 100% capacity, say, well, look at our bowl record. Yeah, because you played one less game than everybody else in conference. That shit matters, Porter. You can pretend like playing Mercer.
Well, it's not accurate to say
I don't really care.
One less conference game than everyone. Because
the
ACC plays 8 conference games. The Big Ten played 8 conference games until 2017. So that's not necessarily accurate. So the SEC was playing bowl games against the Big Ten and the ACC, and with teams that were playing 8 conference games.
So
Yeah, well, from now on, Mark, when I come on your show, let's set a little rule here. I don't want to talk to jackasses. So unless maybe I shouldn't come on anymore.
Facts, Tim.
Maybe I shouldn't come on anymore.
This is all I do. I'm not
good with
taking
that.
sides, but I have to correct people when they
I don't
make
care about what you said.
inaccurate statements.
Wait, let me be very clear. I don't care about what you said. I'm saying from now on, don't bring jackasses onto the show when I'm talking.
I have not done that.
Because
You
you
can come on and have the
can't
I have not
handle
done that.
because you can't handle facts.
I am
you
not
can't
bringing
handle facts.
jackasses
You know?
onto the show.
Porter, you're an idiot. I'll stand by
I
it,
am
dude.
not
You might
bringing
know
jackasses
you might know
or
some
idiots onto the
scores.
show. I'm bringing capable people onto the show.
You might
That's what
know
I do.
some,
I take calls, and we
you
allow
might know
everyone
some
to speak.
scores and some past games and some records. But when it comes to analysis, no, dude, you're an airhead.
Yeah,
man. Sorry.
because I bring facts, I'm an
Sorry.
idiot. Do you realize how
you're
stupid
not
that
bringing
is?
facts. You're bringing opinion. Don't you know the difference?
I'm bringing
Jesus.
facts.
You don't even know the
If
difference
you
between
call
opinion and fact. I'm not going to argue with you.
Okay.
Okay.
We
You can't
have a
because
we
you
obviously
can't
have a
argue,
conversation
dude.
that
Porter,
Tim doesn't want to take part in, so
settle
we can
down,
end it
Porter.
right here.
You can't argue because you can't bring facts.
Porter, settle down.
Porter.
I'm done. That guy.
Well, no, I'm running the show.
I'm done with him.
I'm running the show, so I will dismiss people or they can leave whenever they want. So, Porter, thank you for being here. We do appreciate you being here. Sorry for the name calling.
I don't understand.
We
it.
appreciate
I
you
really
being
don't.
here. I wanted to wrap this up like an hour ago. So,
All right. Thanks,
thank you,
guys.
Porter.
Thanks.
All right, Tim. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm going to
Thanks for
stick to my
calling.
shows from now on. You guys have a good
Very
one.
good. Thanks. You guys know my tact. I don't take sides. I just lay it out there as it is. And so when there are inaccurate comments, I'm going to obviously correct those. But other than that, I'm going to allow people to state their mind. That's one of the big reasons why we don't do this scrum business here, because usually I check out because there are 2 or 3 people arguing over each other and 2 or 3 people that, not in this case, so I want to make it clear, not in this case, but in other cases that don't know what they're talking about. So I've had that because there's been a couple of times when people have been like, oh, let a bunch of people on at the same time. And no, we're not doing that here. Again, because I'm capable of handling a conversation with one person at a time. And then occasionally if somebody wants to jump in, but I apparently made the mistake of allowing to reel in, and then that caused it to go on from there. So the people that were on tonight obviously are not going to come to any kind of agreement on such things. But so a few times I had to step in just to correct a few statements that were made. So I will always do that. So you guys understand, and I do that with the chat. I'm not going to let you off the hook if you're stating things that are incorrect or that need clarification. So in this case, yes, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are playing 9 conference games, and the Big 10 is playing 9 conference games, and that's been going on here for several years. The SEC and the ACC play 8 conference games. However, prior to 2017, the Big 10 was playing 8 conference games. So just to clarify that. And then, of course, the SEC is going out and playing bowl games against the Big 10 and the ACC, and them playing 8 conference games. I'd have to dive in a little bit deeper. I see that the Pac-12 was playing, they were playing 8 conference games in 2005. So, for example, in 2005, USC played in that national championship game in 2005, the 06 Rose Bowl, and they played 8 conference games that year. So they missed a team in there somewhere. So there was somebody USC didn't play that particular year, and everyone else missed a game as well. So there were just 8 conference games in the Pac-10 at the time. All right, Moose, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you being here. And thank you so much for gifting the Voice of College Football membership to somebody. So hopefully somebody picked that up. I still am not necessarily completely up on how all of that works. You guys gift memberships and then it randomizes something and spits it out for somebody. So hopefully somebody will appreciate that. Definitely I do, Moose. So thank you so much for being here. And we will be back Monday morning. And unless some news breaks, and possibly show up on Sunday as well. John, don't forget to hit the Amazon link for Mark. John, thank you so much for that. Yes, we have had a 3-hour show. And so thank you so much for that. The Amazon link, it's there. It's available. It's transparent to everything that you do. So it doesn't change your shopping experience. And again, you contribute to the channel. It does not cost you a penny. So thanks for the reminder, John. We'll see everyone back here bright and early Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern.